Chapter 661. This update caused a huge uproar. Studios, professional players, ordinary players, professional players, players with money, all kinds of players reacted to this update the moment they saw it. What was especially strange was a player from a certain main city. He strongly condemned this update, and his statement received a positive response. In an instant, tens of thousands of people came forward to sign their names. Just as everyone was shocked, Brother Yu, who was reading the thread in front of the computer, silently closed the thread. This was the alliance of 10,000 guilds that had just completed the transaction of the efficiency leveling method. After a major transaction of 200 gold coins, they suddenly released this update. How could they not be furious? There were many people like them. Countless players who had spent all their money in the last second of the update were now grief-stricken. As for Brother Yu, he was browsing the web while discussing his next deal on QQ. With the sudden announcement of the update, Brother Yu immediately knew that the transaction was going to fall through. Sure enough, the avatar on the other side of QQ jumped and sent a "look at the update" message. After that, there were no more messages. Many people who had just read the opening had already rushed to the forum to complain. In reality, this update by the officials was also lengthy. After the opening, there were thousands of words. The officials said that the game's currency would stop being refreshed, but it did not mean that they would no longer interfere. However, from now on, the currency refresh would no longer be uncontrolled. The officials would adjust the amount of currency, the quantity of goods, the price of goods, and the speed of currency circulation in the game. For this reason, they had specially hired the famous economic expert, XXX, as a consultant. Of course, the players had no idea what this XXX was. However, after seeing the officials' comments, some of the players who knew a little about the game understood. The rules of controlling the release of the currency were almost the same as a country's currency in real life. The official was continuing the path of making the game more realistic. However, the problem was that in real life, goods were produced, processed, reprocessed, and put on the market. People used money to purchase them, and the money that was used to purchase them was put back into production. This was a perfect cycle. However, there was no such system in the game. This was because the items in the game were never produced by the input of money. Instead, they were refreshed by the system. Without this kind of industrial chain structure, the currency was controlled, but the goods were constantly produced in large quantities. Players held onto their money tightly and were reluctant to spend it. Wouldn't that cause economic regression? The game officials did not say much about this, but the players were able to sniff out some clues from another rule. Among the minor rules derived from this currency rule, one of them was that if one did not log into the game for a month, their account would be erased, and all the currency and items in the account would be confiscated. If there were special circumstances that required them to stop playing for more than a month, they would have to apply to the system for account preservation. What the players noticed was the fact that the items were confiscated. If the currency was taken back by the system, it would naturally be easy to stuff it into the hands of any NPC. However, the items would also be confiscated. Could it be that the items would be controlled by the system like the currency? As the system made this announcement, the update was still in progress, so the players had no way to go into the game to farm monsters and experiment. They were all extremely anxious. Some online trading websites, after all the currency trading orders were taken back, the number of equipment trading orders also decreased. The online trading orders were all directly traded with RMB. Right now, the value of gold in the game was bound to increase. Although the value of equipment would decrease, due to this subtle confiscation of items, the gold price of the equipment might just be an illusion due to the appreciation of gold. Its true value would actually increase. At the end of the day, RMB was the true hard currency in the game. If you really wanted to compare the value, you would have to use RMB to measure it. As they were temporarily unable to log into the game, the players could only worry helplessly. As for the second update, in reality, it was something that the players were very concerned about recently. However, under the gold rule, it seemed insignificant. The second update was City War. At a time when everyone was panicking, the system actually created such a major event like City War. The players felt that this was like starting a war to divert the attention of the people. However, complaining was just complaining. This was something that everyone had been concerned about for a long time. There were still many people paying attention to it, especially the guild leaders of the big guilds. No one expected that the rules of this city war would be completely different from what they had expected. The city war was still a competition between players, but it wasn't a direct confrontation. Instead, it was through attacking the city. The system would determine the power division of the main city based on the points awarded. Power division was another subtle choice of words. The players hadn't even figured out what was going on yet, and now, the game developers had sent out these unclear updates. The players were furious. The guild leaders of the major cities went on QQ, YY, MSN, and all other communication tools to contact the players in their guilds. They went to the forums to make a ruckus, insisting that the game developers explain the situation clearly. The officials were also furious. There were people who didn't even finish reading the previous update before running out to spout nonsense. Why was it like this time? Actually, this time, the players couldn't be blamed. The number of visitors on the official website was too high, and the page refreshed very slowly. When the players saw the second update, they thought that the power division was over, but in reality, it hadn't refreshed completely. After shouting and yelling for a while, they turned around and took a glance. Why was there a scroll bar next to it? They hurriedly scrolled down, and the content was complete. It turned out that the meaning of the power division was, the final ownership of the main city wouldn't belong to any guild. The highest ruler of the main city would still be the system. The guilds would form a ranking in the main city attack battle, and the system would finally divide the main city's power division according to their points. The calculation method was very simple. All the main cities would be divided into 10,000 points, and the guilds would be divided according to their points according to their ranking. For example, after the city war ended, the first place guild would receive 1,000 points and would be given 10% of its territory. The second place guild would receive 500 points, and another 500 points would be given to the second place guild, and so on and so forth until all 10,000 points were distributed. Even if the remaining guilds received points, they would not be given any territory to claim their territory. The way to obtain points was naturally the simplest and most direct way to kill the defending enemy troops. However, killing enemies not only required quantity, but also quality. Battles that had a decisive impact on the final outcome of the battle would have more generous points as rewards. In addition, killing enemies was only the most direct way to obtain points, but it wasn't the only way. There were also a large number of siege-related quests that could also be used to obtain points. Some of the weaker guilds might be able to obtain more points than the bigger guilds in a siege battle if they used it well. In conclusion, a siege war didn't just require bravery. It also required wisdom and luck. This final rule was something that many players didn't expect. Although they didn't expect it, it was reasonable. The main city in the game was quite large, but the largest guild at the moment only had a little over 1,000 people. It was simply a joke to have a city war with such a small number of people. Even if 2 or 3 or 4 guilds fought against each other, they still wouldn't be able to occupy such a large area. This move by the system could be said to be a magnificent feat. At this time, the players couldn't care less about the gold coins, and they couldn't enter the game for the time being. Therefore, very soon, everyone began to busy themselves with the upcoming guild war. The chat group of the guild leaders that was just a game company condemning conference immediately turned into a strategic deployment before the city war. The game officials announced the rules of the city war, and especially pointed out that there were quests in one of the sections. However, the specific content of the quests was not mentioned in the usual style. The more powerful guilds were creeped out by the statement that some of the weaker guilds, if used properly, might be able to obtain more points than the bigger guilds in a siege battle. They temporarily decided that the main force would kill the enemy to obtain points, and the weaker ones would be responsible for searching for quests. This update was obviously very large. The game hadn't been released for the entire day, and the estimated release date had been pushed back 3 times in a row. The game forum became the busiest day ever since the game was released. The number of online players on the forum even broke the online player record during the guild and mercenary group competition. Almost all the players in the parallel world were waiting for the game to be released while scrolling through the forum for gossip. The city war was set for 2 days during the weekend, and the update took up an entire day on Wednesday. After the update on Thursday, the game was released once again. When the players stepped into the game again, they felt a little lost and unfamiliar. The players who reacted immediately rushed to the exchange hall, auction house, and other places in a frenzy, wanting to withdraw all the items that they had consigned for sale. After yesterday's day of suspicion, many players agreed with the statement that not only gold coins, but also equipment will not be able to be farmed in the future. However, before these people could rush to the auction house and the exchange hall, the system had already made an announcement in the world. Due to the adjustment of the gold coin rules, the economy has been completely reshuffled. The equipment and items that the players had consigned for sale previously have been withdrawn and returned to the players' pockets. Since the game was released, this was the first time that the system had shown warmth. Many people shed tears of relief. The guys from Child Elite Group had also come online at this time and were celebrating in the channel. Compared to the players who had just spent a lot of money before the update, these guys had really made a huge profit. The efficiency of leveling up was just before the update, and there was definitely no one who had more gold coins in the game than them. Looking at the gold coins in their hands rising in value, how could these guys not be happy? Gu Fei was relatively calm and said disapprovingly, "Good for nothing." As soon as he came online, before the people from the mercenary group could greet him, July from Reborn Amethyst had already sent him a private message, telling him to hurry back and participate in the city war in 2 days. In Reborn Amethyst's channel, Slender Waist Dance was currently wailing in grief. This girl was also one of the unlucky ones in this update. 2 days ago, she had just bought a lot of items and was preparing to exchange RMB for gold coins, but in the end, she was caught up in the update. Now that she was back, all the orders for RMB to buy gold coins were gone, and everyone was holding onto their gold coins tightly, waiting for it to rise in value. At this time, Slender Waist Dance only had a few copper coins left in her pocket. Spending money so cleanly, she could be considered a genius. My condolences, my condolences. For the first time, Gu Fei also sent a message to express his condolences, and it immediately attracted a crowd. In the memory of all the girls, this was the first time Qianli spoke in the guild channel when he was drunk. "Qianli, you have quite a lot of gold coins on you, right? A while ago, your Qianli's drunk studio was the one that made the most money." Luluo said, "I don't have much, so I gave it all to them." Gu Fei said, "Good for nothing, I didn't ask you for money." Slender Waist Dance looked at Gu Fei with disdain for pretending to be poor. "It really isn't much, I only have a few tens of thousands." Gu Fei said, "A few tens of thousands wasn't much. If it wasn't for all the girls here, they would have definitely cursed at him. However, everyone knew that a few tens of thousands wasn't a lot to them. Didn't those guys all get around 200,000 each time? A few tens of thousands isn't a lot, let's split it among everyone." Luo joked. "Okay." Gu Fei was very straightforward. There was an awkward silence in the channel. The girls weren't as shameless as Yu Tianxinming's and scathed in battle. If it was them, even if they were shocked, they would still be discussing how to split the money. "Ahem. I'm joking." Luluo said, "Yeah, I know. I'm joking too." Gu Fei said, "Fuck." Slender Waist Dance led the others in disdain. It was clear that being a person was difficult. If you say give it to them, they don't want it, but if you say no, they'll say you're stingy. Gu Fei chatted in the 2 chat channels as he walked towards Amethyst's office. He had been in Cloud City for the past few days, and now that he was out of the revival point, he headed over. There weren't many people in the office when he arrived, only a few had arrived. Most of them had just logged on and were rushing over, so there weren't many who were as fast as Gu Fei. The only ones who arrived earlier than him, other than those who logged off, were Slender Waist Dance. Slender Waist Dance was still crying, but when she saw Gu Fei, she opened her hand to reveal 4 pitiful copper coins. "Look, there's only a few left." Yeah. Gu Fei nodded, took out a gold coin from his pocket, and tossed it into her hand. Here's a gold coin for you. I'll kill you. Slender Waist Dance pulled out her sword and was about to pounce, but Gu Fei hurriedly took out a myriad gold pouch and tossed it into her hand. Take this first. That's more like it. Slender Waist Dance accepted it without hesitation. July and the other's eyes were popping out. He really dared to give this one, and that one he really dared to accept that one. Slender Waist Dance had another 10,000 gold, and her smile returned to her face. She put the myriad gold pouch into her pocket, and threw away the ones in her hand as she was annoyed. Gu Fei was speechless. Rich people were rich people after all. No matter how much trouble you made in the game, you wouldn't be able to hurt them at all. Slender Waist Dance was in dire straits, mainly because she had money but had no way to buy gold coins. When the market normalized, she would still be the #1 RMB warrior. The few coins that Slender Waist Dance threw away were silently picked up by July and stuffed back into her hand. She then looked at Gu Fei and said, "Let's talk about the city war. Our guild is very weak, and killing enemies for points is definitely not possible. We can only rely on quests. What do you think, Qianli?" "Why are you asking me? You guys can decide for yourselves." Gu Fei didn't care at all. "But there are so many guilds. Even if we snatch quests, we won't have any advantage. It seems like we can just accompany the prince and have some fun," July said. "Yeah." Gu Fei nodded. He quite agreed with this view. The situation this time was completely different from the guild competition. At that time, it was a one-on-one elimination, and an accident could decide the outcome of the match. That was why the reborn Amethyst still had a chance to be a dark horse. But this time, all the guilds were competing against the same starting line, and the chances of them taking advantage of the situation were greatly reduced. "Can points be bought?" Slender Waist Dance asked. They couldn't even buy gold coins, and they still hadn't changed their habits. "It can't be. How can it be bought?" Chiyu said. "Then can we hire a mercenary group?" Gu Fei asked. "There's no description. You're thinking of..." July thought that Gu Fei would bring their child elite group to help, but then she suddenly remembered that apart from Sword Demon and Brother Yu, everyone else in their group had a guild, so she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "I have a few friends who don't have a guild. I wonder what this activity is for." Gu Fei was actually thinking of South Sword and the other 7. They were neither a guild nor a mercenary group, but they learned from Child Elite Group and formed their own mercenary group. As for the Child Elite Group, they did indeed have a guild, and they were all participating in their own guild meeting. Han Family Young Master and Unscathed in Battle. Based on their level rankings, even if they weren't the core members of their guilds, they still had the qualifications to attend this kind of core meeting. Yutian Shenming originally had a conflict with Unhindered 4Cs because of Gu Fei, so he was only a nominal existence in the guild. However, after Unhindered 4C's quest, Child Elite Group helped him greatly at a crucial moment, so this conflict didn't exist anymore. Yutian Shenming was indeed a top-notch expert, so he was summoned again. As for the guildless Sword Demon and Brother Yu, Sword Demon acted as if nothing had happened and continued to practice. Brother Yu also went with Sword Demon. Recently, there were many rumors about the drop rates of the mobs in the past. Once the game started, Brother Yu couldn't wait to study it. The system didn't mention anything about mercenary groups. It only said that guilds are participating. It seems like there's nothing to do with mercenary groups. July said, "The system didn't say anything, but it shouldn't stop mercenary groups from participating, right? At most, the people they kill won't be counted, but for example, when doing some quests, it might still be useful." Gu Fei said, "Even if that's the case, in this situation mercenary groups, how do we calculate the price?" July said, "Currently, the economy was in a state of confusion. No one knew how much a gold coin was worth. At this moment, Han Family Young Master suddenly sent a message in the mercenary channel, 'Yo, this update isn't bad.' 'What's wrong?' the others hurriedly asked. Han Family Young Master had spoken. Could it be that this guy found some loophole? Everyone was excited. 'The wine has been reduced,' Han Family Young Master said. 'How much?' Brother Yu was quick-witted. 10 times. Han Family Young Master said. Tens. Is this the current system's current currency value? Brother, you mumbled. It's just wine. But to me, it's equivalent to having 10 times the money in my hands. This update is really good. Han Family Young Master said. Chapter 662. The prices of the items have been adjusted too? How generous! Brother, you didn't expect this at first. He hurriedly went out with the sword demon to kill small monsters and see what they dropped. They hadn't even left the door when Brother Yu heard the news and hurriedly slipped into a shop by the side of the road. This was a weapon shop. The systems shop didn't sell anything good. It was just some common equipment, and they were quite expensive. Normally, no one would pay attention to it, treating it like a garbage collection station. If they found some trash that no players would buy, they would just throw it at this shop. The blacksmith in the weapon shop also sold equipment repair services that were more popular. Every day, they wouldn't miss the opportunity to repair the equipment that they passed by. Brother Yu entered the weapon shop and found that it was very lively. A large group of players crowded in the room. He almost didn't even have a place to stand. Brother Yu didn't have time to be surprised. Another person came in and pushed him into the door. The room was crowded and messy. He heard a player shouting, "It's my turn, it's my turn." What's going on? Brother Yu asked a player who was desperately squeezing forward. Making money. The player replied without turning his head. You don't know anything. Why are you joining in the fun? Someone looked back at Brother Yu with dissatisfaction. Brother Yu grew up in disdain. He didn't take these words seriously and continued to ask shamelessly, "How do you make money?" There were naturally good people. Someone said to him, "Blacksmithing and issuing mission orders to collect all kinds of ores." Didn't they collect in the past? Brother Yu was puzzled. The weapon shop in the game had always collected all kinds of ores. For example, the armorsmith shop would collect some leather and cloth. The tailor shop was the same. This didn't seem to be anything new. In the end, someone immediately looked down on Brother Yu for being shallow. Is it still the same as before? Didn't you hear? There will be a limit to the number of these missions in the future. That's just gossip on the forum. Brother Yu said. How could Brother Yu not know about the news that was stirred up in the forum? There would still be money-making quests, but there would be a limit to the number of quests. This was the answer that everyone agreed upon in a certain thread on the forum. In fact, there was no official statement. It was just speculation. Yesterday it was gossip, but now it isn't, someone said. But is there really a limit? Brother Yu asked. I don't know yet, but the blacksmith shop has a limit on the number of weapons they can sell, someone said. Is that so? Let me see. Brother Yu squeezed forward with all his might. No one would compete with Brother Yu for the equipment in the blacksmith shop. Seeing that this guy didn't want to compete with them for the quest, everyone let Brother Yu live. Brother Yu panted heavily as he squeezed in front of the weapon shop owner. Sure enough, in the past, the few weapons on the weapon rack were just for show. In fact, they were limitless. As long as you bought them, there was no need to worry about the system not selling them. But now it was different. There were only a few weapons on the weapon rack, there were no more. Brother Yu was surprised. Even if no one wanted your items, it wasn't that absolute. You only had 3 to 5 weapons on display. If someone was crazy enough to take them all, then the weapon shop would be empty. Wouldn't that be a joke? Brother Yu thought about it and asked about the price. This was the same as the wine in the tavern. There was a price reduction, but it wasn't like the wine that was reduced by 10 times. Compared to the original price, it couldn't be compared. Even Brother Yu didn't know the original price. It was just that no one had ever paid attention to the system's whiteboards. They didn't pay attention to their value. It was just a fleeting impression. Now that they looked at it, they only knew that it was cheaper. Brother Yu thought about it while casually glancing at the equipment on the weapon rack. He suddenly shouted, "Blue equipment? Gold equipment? Fuck, there's even purple equipment." Everyone looked down on Brother Yu's ignorance. Tisk, it's purple. Do you dare to buy it? On the weapon rack was a purple one-handed sword. One side of the blade was sharp, while the other side was cut into a sawtooth shape. The name of the sword was Cold Black Saw. It added 15 points to strength and constitution, 5 points to agility, 35% attack power, 20% chance of inflicting wounds, 25% damage per second, lasting 6 seconds. There was no cure. It's a weapon with effects. Brother Yu continued to exclaim. In the past, players only divided weapons into skill weapons and non-skill weapons. Weapons with skills were worth more than those without skills. However, as the equipment became more abundant, players gradually discovered that weapons could actually be divided into 3 main categories. The first category was skill weapons. In addition to additional attributes, the weapon came with a skill. The second category was effect weapons, which would produce some special effects when attacking. In fact, there were such weapons in the early days, such as enchantment and fatal strike. However, because players had seen so many of them, they regarded them as ordinary and did not pay attention to them. It was not until there were more and more types of effects that players realized that these types of weapons also belonged to a major category. As for the third category, there were no skills or effects. They were weapons with additional attributes. At first, players thought that these types of weapons were the most worthless. Slowly, he walked out of the weapon shop under the dumbfounded gaze of the crowd. Of course, even though he was burning money, Brother Yu did not miss the details. He noticed that after he paid for the sword, the equipment was no longer on the weapon rack. The weapon shop owner took another sword from the blacksmith and put it on the rack. This time, it was just an ordinary white sword. It would really be gone after selling it. The white sword that the boss took out might be the stock that was prepared for this update. But no matter what, the stock would eventually be sold out. At that time, would the weapon shop just be empty? Would the system allow such a big joke to appear in the game? Just as Brother Yu was thinking, he suddenly remembered that he had been too focused on burning the buns just now. He had originally planned to sell an unwanted piece of equipment to the boss. He wanted to test if the system would return the money after collecting the equipment, but he had forgotten. The weapon shop had put on an act for once. Brother Yu was too embarrassed to return. Fortunately, the weapon shop was not the only shop in Cloud City. Brother Yu walked a few streets and came to another one. After such a short time, this weapon shop was even more lively than the previous one. People were piling up on the street. It seemed like some impatient person had been wondering if this money-making quest was still around since last night, so he tried it out as soon as he got online. Then, the news spread, and players who were afraid that they wouldn't be able to earn money from now on all rushed over. People were afraid of being poor. Brother Yu was also very tenacious when it came to research. He would not retreat because there were too many people. He went over and squeezed with a bunch of people. Finally, someone squeezed in. This time, he did not say anything. The others squeezed in with the blacksmith and miner. He went to the weapon shop and handed over a blue weapon that he had randomly gotten a few days ago. He took it out and asked the boss, but the boss still accepted it. The price was naturally the same as the system's usual high-quality item, treating it like trash. It completely ignored the value of the item in the players' hearts. It actually still accepts. Then all the players who got trash will still throw it into the shop. The system said that the NPC's currency is also limited. He is collecting equipment here, and the other side is collecting ores. How long can this continue? The system will keep giving them money? No matter how rich the system is, there will be a day when it runs out, right? After it runs out, it will refresh? Isn't this the same as returning to the original path? What's the difference from not refreshing? Brother Yu pondered again. The value of his blue weapon itself was not high. In addition to the current situation, it was not worth selling at all. The original boss wanted to accept it, so he handed it over. However, when he looked up again, the boss handed him the money and turned around to hang the equipment on the weapon rack. Fuck! Brother Yu was shocked. He hurriedly asked the boss how much it was selling for. When the boss reported the price, Brother Yu was shocked. When the system sold it again, it did not treat it as trash. Instead, it became more like a player's. This was clearly the original market price of the equipment. It was roughly converted after the update. There's actually such a move. Brother Yu tested another setting. He couldn't figure out what kind of situation this research would lead to. He just dropped a line in the mercenary channel with a heavy heart. It's hard to say what will happen with this update. What's wrong? Everyone hurriedly asked. Everyone was very concerned about this update. Brother, you did not say anything. He showed everyone the black cold saw that he had just bought. Fuck, where did you get it? Everyone exclaimed. The few of them were very familiar with each other. They were very clear about what kind of equipment each of them had. For a purple equipment like the black cold saw, the production rate was very low. Not everyone had the chance to own a roadside item. Sometimes, even if you had the money, there was no market. I bought it from the system shop. Brother, you told them about what happened. Fuck, there are still a few shops in the city. Let's go and take a look. Yutian Shenming jumped up. I just went to the weapon shop in Shi City again. I didn't see any purple equipment. But other than purple equipment, there are blue and gold equipment on sale in the weapon shop now. However, the quantity is very low. I tried to buy a blue equipment from the shop in Shi City. After I bought it, there was no new stock to replace it. Also, I sold a piece of blue equipment to him. Guess what? After the shop got it, he immediately put it up for sale. The price was the same as the goods he had in his hand. I've noticed these prices. I feel that it's more like the player's market. This isn't normal. The items sold by the system are at the same price as the players, and they're even selling exquisite equipment. I can't figure out what's going on. Brother, you said, Brother, you're really a player's body, but a GM's life is cheap. What does the crap you're worrying about have to do with you? If one parallel world falls, thousands of parallel worlds will stand up. You're a player, and you're afraid that you won't have games to play? If I had to say, this update is even better. We're all equipped with exquisite equipment and have lots of gold coins. This is too much of an advantage. Let's seize the time and enjoy it. Han family young master looked down on Brother Yu again. Sigh. I'll go to a few more system shops to take a look. Brother Yu didn't understand at all. He was born to worry. Everyone else was in the middle of a guild meeting, so they all started to get distracted and discuss the future of this update in the channel. Gu Fei would still interrupt a few times at first, but he gradually realized that his interruptions were just jokes and had nothing to do with the actual discussion, so he slowly shut up. The pre-war meeting on the side of the reborn Amethyst was as ridiculous as usual. They strayed away from the topic of the currency update. The girls counted how much food they had left, and Slender Waist Dance started to act generous again. Some of them didn't have much money, so she took the money pouch that Gu Fei gave her and stuffed gold coins into their hands. The girls understood her personality, so they all avoided her, but who was faster than her? In the end, they had no choice but to take a few even if they didn't want them. Slender Waist Dance returned the money as she called out, "Don't be shy, everyone. Take some." "If you don't have enough," asked Qianli. The girls weren't that shameless. It made Gu Fei feel awkward. Slender Waist Dance had already announced it, so how could he not do something? He had no choice but to carry a money pouch as if he was giving out food, grabbing a handful here and there. July watched as the two of them messed up the guild meeting like they were helping out refugees. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There was only so much information about the city war, and nothing much could be discussed. In the end, they decided to focus on the quest, but Gu Fei and Slender Waist Dance could go kill the enemies. July asked the two if they needed a cleric. Gu Fei replied to Luo Luo over and over again. He shivered and shook his head. The players spent the next 2 days in a daze. The currency update had brought about a lifeless atmosphere in the market. Everyone only wanted to earn money, and no one dared to spend money carelessly. However, the taverns were still as crowded as ever. The price of wine had been cut by 10 times. The cheapest red wine now cost 2 coppers per glass. It would be too much to be reluctant to spend money. Gu Fei couldn't rest in peace these 2 days. The city war was imminent, and all the big guilds had their eyes on him, the current #1 expert. They thought of all sorts of ways to poach him. Other than the local guilds in Cloud City, some guilds that he didn't know from other places also sent letters to negotiate. Even drifting came to persuade him. Who knew where this guy had drifted off to? How did he join a guild again? He asked Gu Fei if he wanted to join him. Gu Fei was at a loss. The two of them were rivals last time, and they didn't have a good time. Why did this guy act as if nothing had happened and still wanted to join him? What was the meaning of this? Was he taking in underlings? Water Depth made a huge profit this time. He asked Gu Fei and was rejected. Then he tried to poach 100-era statesmen. 100-era statesmen didn't have a guild in the first place. Among the people he knew, only Water Depth wanted to poach him. Water Depth knew this guy's personality after hanging out with him for a few days. He directly said that the city war was coming, and he wanted him to temporarily join their guild and help them out. How could someone of 100 Lives Statecraft's character refuse? Of course, he agreed without hesitation. Gu Fei's first reaction when he heard this news was, shady. This guy from a studio is really shady. Luckily, 100-era statesmen didn't cooperate with the studio. Otherwise, he would definitely be sold and still be helping people earn money. Water Depth's advantage wasn't just this. Sword Demon also didn't have a guild. Water Depth said, "Don't be idle, come and help me out." Would Sword Demon refuse? Of course not. Water Depth got two great experts before the city war. According to the people in the guild, he would bump into trees when he walked recently. After he bumped into them, he would grin foolishly. There was no end to it. 2 days passed quickly. Gu Fei was annoyed. After being harassed for a long time, he turned off the message. But he had nothing to do these days. For the first time, there wasn't a single mission in the wanted mission office. How lonely was this world? Everyone was either thinking about making money or thinking about the city war 2 days later. They didn't even PK, which made Gu Fei worried. On the weekend at 6 p.m., the game stopped for an hour for the final update before the city war. An hour later, the server opened on time. Players swarmed into the game. After their eyes lit up, all the players were surprised to find that they weren't in the familiar offline area. Everyone had been thrown outside the main city. That familiar main city was now thousands of meters away. They could vaguely see the closed city gates. Flags were fluttering on the city walls, and bugles sounded. The city war had officially begun. Chapter 663. The players looked around and realized that they were in a simple war camp. The system broadcast sounded at this time, announcing to all players, during the main city war, the main city will be temporarily closed. The 7 main resurrection points will be temporarily moved outside the city. The coordinates are XXX, XXX. During the main city war, players who do not participate in the main city war can continue to train in the wild. After death, players who participate in the main city war will not lose experience, will not lose levels, and will not lose equipment. After death, players will also resurrect at the 7 locations and can immediately participate in the main city war. The resurrection points have all kinds of supplies that players need. After the system broadcast finished, the players all over the world heard the nagging of the NPCs next to them. City Lord XXX, cruel rule, exploitation of the people. He tramples on our lives, exploits everything we have, suppresses our words and deeds, slaughters our brothers and sisters. We can't endure this anymore. Brothers and sisters, pick up the weapons in your hands and blow the horn to charge. Let us overthrow the dictatorship of City Lord XXX and build a future that belongs to us. The people who sang this were the NPC captains of the various barracks. Each of them was wearing shiny armor. When they sang the last sentence, they pulled out their long swords from their waists and pointed at the main city thousands of meters away. The players looked at each other. What was going on? It was like a peasant uprising. This city war actually had a story behind it. Of course, these words didn't have any effect on the players. Did the players have the time to care about him? The online teleportation was messed up by the system. At this time, they were all sending messages to find their own organizations. This was the most chaotic rebel army in history. The commander had already called for a charge, but the soldiers hadn't even found their own team. Coordinates XXX, XXX, I'm here. Everyone gather, do you hear me? Hurry. Where's the flag? Who has the flag? Isn't it called the flag? Raise the flag. Follow the flag. Quest, There's a quest in the camp. I found a quest. The guild channel was even more chaotic than the scene. It was full of similar voices. Unsworn Sword, as the guild leader of the most powerful guild in Cloud City, was also completely dumbfounded. Usually, they felt that their guild could be said to be the tyrant of the city, but now that the entire city's guild was mobilized, they finally understood what people meant. In a main city with 500,000 players, how could a guild with a little more than 1,000 players possibly compare? For the first time, Unsworn Sword felt that his guild was so insignificant as he stared at the endless sea of heads that covered the mountains and plains. Level 6? What was a level 6? Even the 10 Societies Alliance in Moonlit Night City, with 4,000 people, was just a drop of water in front of such a formation. Unsworn Sword had never seen such a big scene before. Actually, what he saw in front of him was not enough for 500,000 people. There were 500,000 players in the city, but a significant portion of them didn't play in guilds. There were also some who had joined guilds but weren't interested in participating in the event. The guilds couldn't force them to join, and there were also those who didn't want to get involved in this mess, so they pretended that nothing had happened. In fact, if it weren't for the official promise that the points obtained from this event would be exchanged for experience points regardless of ranking. In short, participating in this event was much more worthwhile than leveling up. It was because of this rule that many players were able to stay in the game. In this chaotic situation, a large guild like Unhindered was actually a burden. After calling out to people for a long time, he didn't see anyone from his own guild come to his side. Perhaps there were, but frankly speaking, there were over 1,000 players in the guild, and Unsworn Sword didn't even know a third of them. The ones he was familiar with could be counted on his hands. If the guild leader was like this, then what about the members? There were many people in large guilds like them who didn't know each other. At this time, on the plains, countless people from the same guild stood side by side, gazing into the distance, wondering, where are the brothers from my own guild? When their gazes turned to the side, they glanced at the badge. Hey, we're on the same side. On the other hand, smaller guilds like Amethyst Reborn and Immortal Among Flowers moved quickly. Everyone in the guild was as close as a family, and they were very familiar with each other. Their numbers were small, and they gathered quickly. Amethyst Reborn's members who were online were already in place. July looked left and right, puzzled. Where's Qianli? They dropped the ball at a crucial time. Hurry up and call him. Slender Waist Dance shouted as she sent a message to Gu Fei. In the end, she received a system notification. Enemies are not allowed to communicate. Slender Waist Dance was obviously not the only one who sent a message to Gu Fei. At this time, July and Luoluo also received a private message, and they received the same reply. She looked up and saw the confusion on everyone else's face. What does this mean? What enemies? Luoluo asked. Is it referring to the city war? The enemy in the city war. Isn't that the city's defenders? Qianli is defending the city? The girls were in an uproar. What was going on? A top-notch expert was selected to defend the city. The system was cheating. Gu Fei was also at a loss at this moment, and he was extremely at a loss. When he went online, he appeared at the resurrection point as usual. He did not notice that there were no players around him. Because it was a city war, he wanted to gather with the girls, so he sent a message to ask where to meet. In the end, he received the system's reply, enemies are not allowed to communicate. Gu Fei was confused, so he sent a message to Child Elite Group's channel, but the system's reply was the same. Gu Fei was puzzled. When he looked up again, he realized that the resurrection point was frighteningly quiet. Usually, no matter what time it was, the resurrection point would always be flashing with white light, and people would come and go, almost without interruption. What was going on today? Why wasn't there a single person at such an important event? Gu Fei walked out of the knight's camp where he went offline and was shocked. In the square in front of the knight's camp, a team of elite knights had already assembled. Gu Fei went forward to take a look and recognized that they were NPCs, not players. He was puzzled. The system broadcast ended at this moment, and the captain of the team of knights was seen waving his sword. Warriors, There is a group of thugs trying to disrupt our peaceful lives. They have gathered a large number of troops and are preparing to attack our city. Warriors, take up your weapons, defend your home, defend your honor, and protect your brothers and sisters. Come with me and slay these thugs under our sword of justice. When Gu Fei heard this, he was completely dumbfounded. Wasn't this a main city attack? Why was he in the middle of a song about defending the main city? Why was he surrounded by NPCs? Where were the players? Where were the players? Gu Fei ran through a few streets and did not see a single player. Instead, he saw system guards gathering and walking around. The system's formation was very different from usual. Other than the usual system guards, Gu Fei also saw a square formation of mages and priests. When he passed by the Thieves' Guild, he also saw a group of assassins. They didn't line up, speak, or boost morale like the warriors and knights. They just sat in silence, expressionless, and did not say a word. The NPC's performance of this kind of imposing manner was perfect. But in this silent face, Gu Fei saw a blank face, which made him feel a sense of familiarity. Sword Demon! Gu Fei shouted. Sword Demon hurriedly turned his head, and when he saw that it was Gu Fei, he was also excited. What's going on? Gu Fei walked over in a few steps. I didn't know what was going on at first, but now that I see you, I think the problem might be in our camps. Sword Demon said. Camps? Yes, because of our camps, we were divided into the system that guards the main city. Sword Demon said. What kind of explanation is this? I didn't see this announcement. Gu Fei said. How many people can there be in a camp? That's why the system didn't make a special announcement. Sword Demon said. If there's no special announcement, then we're considered normal people. Gu Fei said. Who knows what rules there are in this? Sword Demon said. Then what do we do now? Fight with hundreds of thousands of players? After saying this, Gu Fei suddenly became a little excited. This was fun. And he also heard the system announcement just now. Dying in a city battle didn't cause any losses, but equipment durability would drop. Gu Fei had always disregarded life and death when he piked himself, mainly because he didn't want to cause trouble for the players. If he didn't have this thought, why would he be so obsessed with the wanted quest? If he wanted to PK, wouldn't the streets be full of people? Wasn't apple vinegar made like this? Thinking of this, Gu Fei hurriedly said, Then that apple vinegar and water-breaking arrow, aren't they also in the same camp? They've both dropped to level 40, but they still don't know. And even if they are, it's probably based on their residency, right? Sword Demon said. Then didn't you go to help Water Depth? Why didn't they send you to Forest Shade City? I don't have a residency there. I've been training here these past few days. Before I went offline, I just teleported to Forest Shade City, and then wasn't there a system maintenance? When I came back up, I was back here. I wanted to tell Water Depth, but the message couldn't be sent. Sword Demon said. You say there's only 2 of us defending the city. If we really defend the city, how do we split it? Shall we split it half? Gu Fei asked. That's impossible. Pay attention to the rules of the city battle announced by the system. In fact, it only says 10,000 points to divide the power area. In fact, it doesn't mention whether this city battle quest can be completed or failed. I think that maybe when the players kill 10,000 points, the city battle will be declared over. I think this city battle isn't so much an event, but an update for the players to participate. Through the players' participation, the main city will be divided in the hands of the players. Sword Demon analyzed. I think your analysis is much more reliable than Brother Yu's. Gu Fei said, Brother Yu had been talking about money, the economy, circulation, the value of goods, and so on. He always had to pull people together to discuss. The other 5 members of the elite team were on the verge of breaking down. They all sent him to Jian Nan's side. So, this is a quest with no victory or defeat. It's just an update. I think the best is yet to come. Sword Demon said. What do you mean? After the division of the power area is finished, will it be passed down to the guild? I think that when the time comes, the corresponding rules will be introduced. This power area will be the main stage for the competition between guilds. Saying so much, then what are we going to do? Jump out of the city and fight with 500,000 people? Gu Fei said. I just received a quest. Sword Demon said. What quest? Assassination. The target is a player called White and Black. Who? The Black and White Alliance of Life and Death. Do you know? It's the guild leader. Sword Demon said. Gu Fei came to a realization. They want you to assassinate the enemy's commander. It seems like this group is also a suicide squad. When the time comes, they will specifically target the guild leader. Gu Fei looked at the silent group of assassins inside and outside the Thief Guild Square. Sword Demon smiled bitterly. If they have a target, then they know where it is. What should I do? 500,000 people, where am I going to find them? I don't think there's a chance. Let's just charge up and kill randomly. Gu Fei was already eager to try. 500,000 people. Sword Demon sighed. In fact, he was reminding Gu Fei, I know you're fierce, but today's opponents aren't 5 or 15 people, but 500,000 people. It's a number that can defeat you with just one spit from each person. When are these guys going to make their move? When the time comes, we can mix in with the NPCs, Gu Fei said. I don't know. They've been sitting there for a long time and they haven't said anything or moved. Sword Demon said. There are some moving around in the city. Let's follow them and take a look. Gu Fei suggested. But Sword Demon nodded. The two left the Thief Guild. At the corner of the street, they saw a group of archers with bows strapped to their backs, valiantly setting off. The two hurriedly followed behind. Of course, the NPCs wouldn't pay attention to them. The two followed the group all the way to the guard tower at the corner of the city. They followed the stairs to the top of Cloud City. Then, they saw the group of archers line up and draw their bowstrings. Fuck. Gu Fei and Sword Demon cursed. This group of archers didn't intend to leave the city. It seemed like they were going to be stationed at the top of the city. It wasn't like players hadn't climbed the city wall before. At this time, it really wasn't the usual city wall for sightseeing. There were many archers and mages, two long-range professions, on top of the city wall. Every 20 to 30 meters on the city wall, there were catapults. Gu Fei and Sword Demon walked closer to take a look. The stones that the catapult wanted to throw were piled up next to it. The head was bigger than a player. Gu Fei and Sword Demon tried to move it together, but they couldn't move it at all. Fuck, what level does a warrior have to be to move it? The system produced such a high-level character, and it's shameless. As Sword Demon said this, he saw a sturdy warrior guard run over. Gu Fei and Sword Demon waited to see how he would move the boulder. In the end, he didn't move it at all. He walked in front of the boulder pile, waved his sword, and shouted, "Load the boulder." Gu Fei and Sword Demon waited to see the coolie. In the end, a white light flashed on the boulder pile and a stone was gone. The catapult's ladle had a stone lying steadily on it. The two of them had tears streaming down their faces. What was there to be serious about with the system? He didn't move it at all and directly refreshed it. After visiting the top of the city wall, they looked down at the bottom. Thousands of meters away were the two of them's true friends, the players. Sword Demon looked for a while and frowned. Why is it so messy? About half an hour had passed, and the chaos outside the city was still there. Many people hadn't found where their guild was yet. Everyone vented their resentment on the system. Why was it randomly refreshing? It was such a mess. They couldn't even find the people, so what was the point of the city battle? At the beginning of the city battle, the system soldiers made declarations and oaths, but the players were so disrespectful. Gu Fei and Sword Demon watched as the stones on the city wall were loaded, the archers' arrows were counted, the mages' fruits were enough, and the melee profession's assault team was neatly assembled at the city gate. Even the assassins who came out of the Thieves' Guild had dispersed from the front of the Thieves' Guild's courtyard, hiding in some unknown corner. As two players who had personally witnessed the scene inside and outside the city, Gu Fei and Sword Demon agreed that if the system didn't go easy on them, the players wouldn't be able to take down the main city at all. From this, they were even more convinced of Sword Demon's inference. The system's activity was just a formality, so it wasn't very serious. The players went online and refreshed randomly, and the two lonely faction players were ignored and directly thrown into the city. Anyway, it didn't look like a carefully planned major activity. The two of them were feeling melancholy. Gu Fei suddenly pointed in a certain direction. Look over there. Sword Demon looked in the direction he was pointing. It was also a black mass of players. He didn't know what was special at all and asked curiously, "What are you looking at?" "Look, that flag. Do you see it?" Gu Fei continued to point. Sword Demon continued to be confused. "Which flag? There are so many flags." "That black and white flag? Is that the guild flag of the Black and White Life and Death Alliance that you mentioned?" Gu Fei said. "Oh, it might be true. Where there's a flag, the guild leader is probably around." "Do you know that person?" Gu Fei asked. "Not really, but I can recognize him when I see him," Sword Demon said. "Let's do it." Gu Fei was excited. Although it was PK with a purpose was always more interesting than meaningless killing. If they really jumped into the sea of people and killed, it would be quite boring. It was like a race. The finishing line was drawn in front of them and they would win if they reached it. The other side didn't even know where the finishing line was. What was the point of running and running? Going now isn't courting death. "Let's wait and see and wait for the players to move," Sword Demon said. "I think your mission is actually quite convenient. When you join the crowd, people don't care which guild you're from. They see you as a person and treat you as a comrade. How would they know that we're from the system?" Gu Fei said. "The key is to find the person," Sword Demon said. "Keep an eye on that big flag," Gu Fei said. "I should have borrowed the binoculars." Sword Demon muttered. The binoculars were now in the hands of the Han family young master. A few days ago, he dealt with the boundless wilderness. When the girl wanted it, he returned it. As a result, a few days before the city war, this guy went to borrow it again. To live eternally among the flowers in the vast wilderness, there was no strategic goal, so he lent it to him again. At this time, the Han family young master was holding the binoculars to observe the main city. As he watched, he froze. He put down the binoculars and rubbed his eyes. He looked at the wine bottles on the ground around him. "Did I drink too much?" "Impossible." The Han family young master thought and raised the binoculars again. This time, he finally confirmed that it was Gu Fei and Sword Demon who disappeared before the city war. How did these two guys suddenly appear on the city wall? Butterfly knot. The city war has officially begun. Chapter 664. Gu Fei and Sword Demon's disappearance and their messages were, "Enemies are not allowed to communicate with each other." This spread throughout their circle of friends. Water Depth messaged the Child Elite Group's members one by one. Amethyst also asked them what was going on. But how would the Child Elite Group's members know? They only found out about it when they heard the guild that these two guys were affiliated with Ask. They all sent messages to test it out. Sure enough, it was the case. They were clearly online but they couldn't contact them. These two had the same disappearance situation, so naturally there should be a common reason. Others might not be able to analyze anything, but the members of the Young Master's elite group were able to come to a conclusion faster than Gu Fei and the Sword Ghoul. The biggest similarity between the two was that they both belonged to the same faction. But even if they had a faction, where did they go? No one could say for sure. In the end, they could only continue to do their own things and wait for the city war to end before they would know. In the end, Han family young master was observing the enemy through his binoculars when he saw these two people. Han family young master also turned his head out of habit to find someone to talk to. In the end, when he turned his head, he realized that this was a guild activity. The people that he usually looked down on were not by his side. Han family young master was helpless and could only speak in the channel. What about on top of the city wall? How did those two guys get there? The channel immediately exploded with activity. If they're in the city, then they're the enemy. Could it be that the players with a faction are considered the system's forces? Brother Yu immediately deduced. The system didn't make such an announcement. Announcement my ass. The system said that only a few people know about factions. Is there a need to make an announcement? As they discussed, They couldn't contact Gu Fei and Sword Demon. As they talked, they began to discuss the guild's situation again. Wusheng, what are you guys doing over there? Yutian Shenming inquired. What else can we do? Charge with our lives. Unscathed in battle said. Bruh. A bunch of uncouth people. They just can't play with any skill, Yutian Shenming said in disdain. Unscathed in Battle's guild was called Warriors' Home, a group of warriors. Of course, such a guild wouldn't amount to much. In fact, its nature was similar to small guilds like Amethyst Rebirth and Immortal Among Flowers. It was just a group of like-minded players gathered together. However, there were still plenty of experts in this guild. A guild like this would naturally have a different mindset when it came to a city war. Unscathed in Battle immediately snorted at Yutian Shenming, "You've grown up. You've gathered another group of people to ambush us, haven't you?" The Four Seas arrow array was already very famous in the Cloud City. "TSK, I don't have anything in common with you." Yutian Shenming expressed his disdain for talking to people from inferior guilds. He turned around and asked, "Gongzi, what about you guys?" "I don't talk to people with low IQ, Han family young master said. "Haha, that's right, me too." Unscathed in Battle laughed. Yutian Shenming was extremely depressed. At this time, the small and medium guilds had already gathered. Large guilds like Sweeping Four Seas and Singing to Wine were also more or less done. Ever since Han family young master discovered the two on top of the wall, he hadn't put down his binoculars. He wanted to see what these two could do in the city. On top of the wall, Gu Fei and Sword Demon noticed the black and white flags and focused their attention there. Black and White Alliance of Life and Death could be considered a rising star in Cloud City. They were already level 5. Although they couldn't compare to Sweeping Four Seas and Singing to Wine, which were full of experts and elites, they still had a lot of talent. With such a rule in this city war, the ones who were the happiest were the medium-sized guilds. The small guilds were extremely lacking in manpower. Under these rules, they couldn't compete with the big guilds. However, for the medium-sized guilds, under these rules, with careful planning and luck, they might be able to compete with the big guilds. In the end, they could get a good ranking, which would greatly benefit their future operations. The player base of the parallel world was large. If you really wanted to develop a guild, you didn't lack people. What you lacked was talent. For example, if a guild had a top 5 or top 10 player, it would be a golden signboard. However, as the level gap was getting closer, the top 5 or top 10 players were no longer that popular. So what if they were top 5 or top 10? They were the same level as you. They weren't that strong. In everyone's eyes, the talent had to be famous in the game and had done something great. For example, Qianli Drunk. This person wasn't top 5 or top 10. Who could be better than him? There was also Slender Waist Dance. Although he wasn't top 5, so what? The number 1 pay-to-win player, he could PK you to death with money. Who would dare to not recognize such an expert? However, such an expert could only be found by chance. Therefore, many guild leaders were developing new ideas. Since they couldn't find a legendary person to join their guild, they would make their own guild into a legend. Starting from this line of thought, there were many ways to do things. Clothing, food, housing, and transportation were all taken care of by people. For example, when going out, everyone wore a scarlet cloak. This was a way to reflect the personality of the group. However, this way of expression was only a symbol. It couldn't reflect the inner nature of the guild. Hence, after the news of the city war was announced, many guilds had passed down orders to their subordinates to display their style and standards in this city war. They wanted to become the most eye-catching guilds in the city war and leave an unforgettable impression in everyone's eyes. The guiding spirit was always very empty. The words were reasonable, but there was no mention of how to do it. Now that the city war was imminent, many guilds were thinking about style and standard in their hearts. However, they didn't know what style and standard was. The Black and White Life and Death Alliance was one of these guilds. However, the guiding principle was slightly clearer. The guild leader, White and Black, proposed, "In this city war, we have to be like a sharp knife. We will stab wherever we point and always tear a gap in the enemy's line of defense because of us. The guild members carefully studied this strategy, and one of the warriors who had defected to the House of Warriors was depressed to find that this strategy was very similar to his original guild strategy when it came to team battles, but they only had 2 words: charge. At this time, the sun was shining brightly. Under the black and white flag, the guild leader, White and Black, was complacent. White and Black was a warrior. His equipment was made according to his name. This was what he had thought of when he named himself. Originally, he was wearing a silver-white armor and a pitch-black cloak. However, a few days ago, he received a pair of boots and a belt. The attributes were quite good, but it just had to be black. It was very eye-catching when he wore it on his body. White and Black was very depressed. He wanted to find someone to make these 2 pieces of equipment white. However, experts pointed out that it was easy to make white if you want to make black, but there was no such technology in the game. White and Black was anxious, worried, and pulled out his hair. He wanted to be pure white and black. Now that he had 2 black pieces of equipment on him, what should he do? Later, this kid had an idea. These 2 pieces of equipment were of the highest quality. He couldn't bear to not use them, but he exchanged all the other parts of his body that could be exchanged. For this, White and Black did not hesitate to pay a high price to buy or exchange. He forcefully exchanged all his other equipment for black. Then the entire cloak was white, and White and Black became pure white and black. In the end, after 2 days of happiness, the system was updated. The currency was updated, and White and Black were no longer pure. All day long, his equipment was black, his little face was pale, and he wanted to kick anyone he saw. At this time, the city war had already begun. White and Black was still unhappy because of his personal economic losses. After proposing a guiding principle, he stood under the flag with a gloomy face and did not speak, waiting for the others to gather. At this time, the entire guild was almost gathered. The vice guild leader moved in front of White and Black. This guy was White and Black's close friend. He knew that the guild leader was in a bad mood recently, so he didn't say much and directly asked, "Everyone is here, where do we go?" White and Black looked into the distance. Apart from the city, there was not a single ghost a kilometer away. No enemies had appeared yet, so it was probably impossible to go to the wall. So he shook his head. "Don't be anxious, let's see. How is Unhindered and the others?" The vice guild leader was very happy. The big guilds have been thrown into chaos by the refresh. They still haven't gathered everyone. Don't they know how to make a flag? White and Black said. They did, but it's not as bright as our black and white flag. It's bright, and has a strong visual impact. The vice guild leader was quite eloquent. "Guild leader, there's a situation." As the 2 were bragging, a sharpshooter member flew over and pointed in the direction of the Cloud City gate. The players never knew that the gate of the main city actually had a gate. They always thought it was a hole, but because of the city war, it had a gate. At this time, the sound of the mechanism at the gate was so loud that it hurt the eardrums of the players a kilometer away. The 4 city gates in the 4 directions of the Cloud City opened in one breath. System guards in bright uniforms stepped out of the city gates and lined up outside the city. The noisy group of players watched on, and gradually, they quietened down. This was a scene that they had never seen since they entered the game. Even when they were fighting monsters in the leveling area, the monsters were scattered all over the place. Even if they were in a pile, they would only be in groups of 3 to 5. When had there ever been thousands of them, and they were lined up so neatly? In comparison, the players looked at themselves. Their team was a mess, with all sorts of equipment. Compared to the uniform and orderly formation of the others, they were like refugees fleeing from a famine. They were being suppressed by the momentum of the system. Who knew which guild leader first returned to reality and even set a military strategy? Attack halfway through. Brothers, attack! The guild leader was also a warrior, and he held a long-handled spear that most warriors didn't like to use. This kind of weapon would be even more majestic if it was ridden by a horse. But at this time, it was stabbed into the ground, and that guy was half a person tall, so it couldn't be used horizontally or vertically. Plus, These otakus were addicted to online games all day long. How many of them had decent figures? They weren't worthy of this ultimate general's weapon at all. Therefore, not many people in the game could hold a long-handled weapon that looked stylish. The warrior guild leader was no exception. He was short and fat. It would have been fine if he had just been holding a sword, but now that he was holding a spear, it made people feel that there must be a hidden race in the game. Otherwise, why would there be a dwarf? This dwarf general set a military strategy, waved his spear, and was the first to rush out. In the midst of thousands of troops, his appearance was extremely eye-catching. He was followed by a small soldier who held a large flag high. Everyone looked up and saw a spear and a flower drawn on the flag. Those who knew had already revealed that this was the guild's spear and rose. The players were speechless. Everyone saw the spear. Was this bastard hinting that he was a rose? In the end, another insider revealed that the name of the guild leader of Spear and Rose was Black Rose. Damn, so shameless. The players were all furious. This kind of person was actually the first to come out among the heroes of Cloud City. The whole city's face was lost. Everyone's morale was immediately boosted. The guild leaders all pulled out their weapons and were about to call for their own guilds to fight when suddenly a muffled sound came from the distance. Then they saw an object fly up from the top of the city wall, coming closer and closer. Just as everyone was watching in a daze, the object flew in a perfect arc and landed lightly on the ground. Dust was kicked up several stories high, and Black Rose and his flag had disappeared. When the dust settled, the flag-carrying soldier slammed the boulder and stamped his feet. "Guild leader, how did you disappear just like that?" The players all sucked in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect the system to have such a heavy weapon. When this stone fell, there was no need to talk about attack or defense. If it still didn't kill him, the players all felt bad. The morale of the soldiers was once again smashed by this stone. Everyone stopped talking about the charge and quietly looked at the walls of the Cloud City. However, this catapult was installed at the back. It was obvious that it was to prevent the people below from directly destroying it. This way, they couldn't see the whole picture, so they could only guess. Among them, only the Han family young master could see clearly. Not only did he recognize the catapult, but he also saw that Gu Fei and Sword Demon were busy with something before the catapult suddenly fired. On the city wall, Gu Fei and Sword Demon were also stunned. The two saw that the NPC on the city wall didn't care about them. The catapults were all loaded with stones, so they wanted to test if they could operate it. In the end, they tried to get on the machine, but the NPCs still didn't care. They completely treated the two as their own people. Sword Demon immediately pulled the trigger of the catapult, and the cannon flew out just like that. "God, it's really accurate. You have some skill." Gu Fei exclaimed. "What happened? What happened?" Sword Demon quickly ran over. He had just run to the back to fire the cannon, so he didn't have time to see what the cannon looked like. "A person just rushed out and you killed him with a stone." "What? You didn't mean it?" Gu Fei asked. "That position can't even see the city." Sword Demon said. "Really? Then he's too unlucky." "Who was it?" "He was killed so easily. It couldn't be Wu Shang, right?" Gu Fei said. Sword Demon usually came and went like a lonely swordsman, but he was quite familiar with the guilds in Cloud City. He looked at the big flag next to the boulder and said, "No, this is the Spear and Rose Guild. Wu Shang isn't from this guild." Each guild's flag was made very big. At this distance, people wouldn't be able to recognize it, but recognizing the flag wasn't a problem. "How do you know about all the guilds?" Gu Fei was curious about this question. Sword Demon laughed. "They all looked for me." Gu Fei suddenly understood. Sword Demon was a top expert. He didn't have a guild, so how could these guilds not try to rope him in? It seemed like they had interacted before. With Sword Demon's kindness, people who had interacted with him wouldn't forget him. "With your cannon, no one would dare to move." Gu Fei said. Just now, they saw that the players were ready to rush, but after Sword Demon's cannon, they were all stunned. Under the city, the two armies confronted each other. No one went forward. They only saw a huge boulder in the middle of the field, a big flag, and a small player who was at a loss. What should we do? How do we sneak out of the city? Just now, Gu Fei and Sword Demon discussed it. They wanted to wait for the battle royale between the system and the players to start. Then, they would sneak into the battlefield and find a way to complete Sword Demon's mission. Their plan was, the system regarded them as one of their own, so they definitely wouldn't make a move. The players didn't know that there were two traitors among them, so when they saw them, they wouldn't treat them as enemies. This way, as long as they knew where the white and black players were, wouldn't it be easy to approach them? Even if they weren't from the same guild, this was a big battle royale. It was completely normal for other players to approach them. In the end, on a whim, they played with the catapult and killed a player with one shot. This scared the others so much that they didn't dare to move. Indeed, that huge boulder was too shocking. If it had been thrown into the crowd just now, at least 5 or 6 people would have been killed. Right now, the players didn't dare to move, but the system guards were guarding the city. It seemed like they didn't plan to take the initiative to attack. Once they exited the gate, they lined up in a row, waiting for the players to come up and steal points. Otherwise, if they all defended the city, the players wouldn't have any tools. How could they attack the city? Sigh, we've wasted time. Sword Demon was extremely regretful. He wanted to kill the white and black players as soon as possible and complete a few more missions. Although the two of them didn't understand what was going on here, they guessed that as long as they did something, there should be rewards. Therefore, Sword Demon was still quite active in making enemies of the players. Anyway, there wasn't even a punishment if they died, so what was there to be afraid of? Just as the two of them were feeling depressed, they suddenly heard a burst of battle cries from a certain direction. Gu Fei tilted his head to listen and suddenly said with joy, "Hey! The west gate has started charging." There were 4 directions to the city. The boulder had hit one side, and at least half of the players didn't know. If they didn't know, they naturally wouldn't be scared. Moreover, the number of guards coming out of the 4 gates was exactly the same. While they were trying to scare one side, the other side couldn't help but attack. Once the other side started charging, the players on the other side started to panic. If they didn't go up, then all the points would be taken by the bastards from the west gate. Thinking about this, the guild leaders were pumped up again. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws. Kill, kill, charge. Kill. Everyone shouted in unison. This time, no one complained about the noise. When everyone heard the shouts of their own side, they felt as if they had suddenly leveled up by 10 levels. One by one, they rushed forward, striving to be the first to do so. Gu Fei and Sword Demon were staring at the black and white flag. White and black originally wanted to make use of the city war to increase the guild's reputation. Adding on the fact that they had just been cheated by the currency update, they were extremely hostile towards the system. As soon as they charged forward, they immediately gave the order and the entire guild began to move. Gu Fei looked and said, "This black and white flag is moving really slowly." Sword Demon smiled. White and black is a warrior. The black and white flag is moving slowly, which means that the flag is following him. Okay, then follow the flag and charge. After Gu Fei said this, he jumped down from the top of the city wall. Damn, I can't do this. Sword Demon was extremely depressed and could only climb the stairs. The walls of the main city weren't just an average height. Gu Fei's flying hooks weren't enough. Chapter 665. Gu Fei now had the teleportation skill, so he dared to jump from any height as long as he controlled the distance and moved well. The Sword Demon didn't have this ability, so he could only obediently run down the stairs. This took up a lot of time, and the players outside the city approached the main city with large strides. The previous rock was caused by Gu Fei and the Sword Demon, so it didn't represent the system's attitude. Now that the players were about to reach the foot of the city, the system finally took action. The archers, mages, and catapults on the city wall suddenly moved together. The system knew all the skills and spells that the players knew, and the system knew all the skills and spells that the players didn't know. The arrows that filled the sky looked the same, but the visual effects of the spells were obvious. Ice, fire, thunder, and lightning were all greeting down. Apart from Heaven's flaming wheel and flaming tree, 1,000 layers of flames, where else had the players seen other area of effect spells? In front of the west corner of the city, ice knives suddenly fell from the sky, and the players on the ground all turned blue. They had been frozen. The east corner of the city was filled with thunder and lightning. A pillar of light hit the ground, and electric sparks flew everywhere. The players who had been hit by spells all became conductors. The electric current ran from one body to another, and the chain of lightning was connected endlessly. The people in the center were even more depressed. This was the area where the catapult's firepower was concentrated. Those who had been hit by spells on the east and west sides were better off. Those who had been hit by the cold and electricity didn't die on the spot. The priests were more diligent, and many people were rescued. However, those in the center were helpless. When the big rock fell, they couldn't even see people on the spot. What was the point of rescuing them? However, after the rock fell, it became a good cover. The other ashen-faced players all hid behind these rocks. This wave of long-range attacks alone made the players throw their helmets and abandon their armor. For a moment, everyone forgot that the system still had melee professions like warriors and knights lined up outside the city wall. The wave of attacks on the city wall stunned the players, and these teams suddenly rushed forward and began to harvest the bewildered players. The players' previous rush was based on impulse, and they weren't prepared. Speaking of which, he didn't know how to prepare. He didn't even know what method the system would use. In the first round, the players at the north, south, east, and west gates had been beaten to the point that they had to run everywhere. Even the guild leader couldn't stop his troops, and he himself was scared out of his wits. His guild leader had experienced large-scale PvP battles in the game, but he had never participated in such a large-scale battle involving hundreds of thousands of players. With just a glance, he almost forgot what his guild emblem looked like. Gu Fei didn't move after flying down the wall. On one hand, he was waiting for the sword demon. On the other hand, he wanted to wait for the system and the players to start fighting so that the two of them could enter and fish in troubled waters. Who would have thought that this scene of a chaotic battle didn't happen at all? The players simply collapsed at the first touch. No matter how good an expert bragged about himself, it was no use at this time. The spells and the big stones were thrown down. Even the quick-witted ones couldn't dodge them even if they wanted to. There were people around them, and they all became obstacles. This battle was terrible. Gu Fei couldn't bear to watch any longer. He reckoned that he wouldn't be any better off if he were among the players. In this kind of situation, there was no room for individual skills to be displayed. Both sides were restricted. At this time, the sword demon also hurriedly ran down the city wall and came out through the city gate. Gu Fei was waiting for him outside the gate. The sword demon ran out and asked, "Where are White and Black and the others?" "White and Black? They're long gone." Gu Fei said. The sword demon had just run away from the city, so he didn't see the players being bullied miserably. Now, he saw deserters all over the ground. There was no way to find White and Black. Most of the flags that the players raised had fallen. They were all running for their lives. Even if they didn't throw the flags away, they would be in their pockets. Who would still hold them in their hands? What's going on? The sword demon was at a loss. When he came down from the top of the wall, the scene in his memory was that the players were charging forward with an indomitable will. How did it become like this when he got down the city wall and out the door? He really couldn't understand. Sigh, the system's attack turned them into this. Gu Fei shook his head. The system really focused on defending the city. After charging for a distance, it stopped and retreated, giving the players a chance to breathe. The players quickly counted their troops when they were free. The guild leaders who hadn't died were all nervously asking a question. Where did they revive? Is it near? It can't be randomly spawning again, right? The system answered this time. The players who died were all revived at the nearest revival point, so they could return to the team as quickly as possible. The blow they received this time was much more severe than when Black Rose was smashed to death by a flying boulder. All the players were dejected. At first, they were still thinking that they could hold their heads high in the city war, but now they didn't dare to make a sound. The various guilds began to hold emergency meetings. Many guild leaders realized that if they continued to treat each other as competitors in the face of such a powerful enemy that they had never seen before, they might not be able to reap any benefits if they continued to fight on their own. The first to set an example was the guild leader of Against the Current. Against the Current. Against the Current was now one of the 5 roaches. In terms of individual appeal, it was even higher than the most powerful guild, reigning the 4 seas. At this time, he took the initiative to send a message to Unsworn Sword to express his goodwill. He suggested that the 2 guilds should set an example, cooperate sincerely, and lead all the guilds in Cloud City to fight the system together. Unsworn Sword was actually discussing this matter with the brothers around him. He also wanted to be the leader, but he didn't expect Against the Current to react so quickly. Before they could finish discussing, Against the Current had already made a move. Unsworn Sword wasn't willing to give up the limelight, but he also knew that this wasn't the time to be sulking. After weighing the pros and cons, he could only accept Against the Current's suggestion. Guild leader Unsworn, you're such a straightforward person. Then let's do this. Let's all meet up and discuss which city gate you guys are at. Against the Current asked. North Gate. What about you guys? Unsworn Sword replied. We're at the West Gate. This isn't a problem. Let's just meet up. Since guild leader Unsworn has agreed to cooperate, I'll call up some other guilds. Against the Current said. How can we trouble you alone? I'll go call up the others as well. Unsworn Sword hurriedly said. The parallel world didn't have a public channel that could be used in the world. So, they could only communicate privately. Obviously, if Against the Current were to call up the masses, they would naturally put their guild in the leading position. Unsworn Sword wouldn't let him monopolize this lucrative position, so he naturally had to be the one to call up the masses. His words would naturally put reigning the 4 seas in the leading position. The 2 of them had a tacit understanding on this matter, so they didn't say much and went to do their own things. However, Against the Current being able to call up Unsworn Sword first proved that he was a step faster. It was just sending a message, so he didn't need to visit them one by one. So when he called up Unsworn Sword, he also sent the message to the other guild leaders at the same time. There were currently 5 level 6 guilds in Cloud City. Against the Current was one of them, and the other 4 were also contacting each other. Unsworn Sword always felt that they were the best, so they should be the leader. In fact, which guild didn't have the same thought? When Against the Current called out, all the other guilds had the same thought. As a result, other than Against the Current, all 4 of them were contacting each other. Unsworn Sword had just sent a message to the 2 of them when he received the same message from 3 other guilds. Only then did he realize that these guilds had already communicated with Against the Current. These guys were the same as him, still foolishly trying to snatch the initiative from Against the Current. These 4 guilds had the time to go against the flow and continue contacting the lower and middle guilds. Unsworn Sword and the others didn't want to be left behind. For a moment, the lower and middle guild leaders were at a loss. Suddenly, all 5 guild leaders of Cloud City sent messages asking for cooperation. What was going on? In the current situation, cooperation was a must, but which guild should they cooperate with to get the most benefits? They had to wait and see. These lower and middle guild leaders didn't know that the 5 guilds had already formed an alliance. Now that the 5 guilds were fighting each other for the first position, the lower and middle guilds thought that the 5 guilds were competing with each other. For a moment, they were weighing which guild to cooperate with. After a long time, they finally came to their senses and laughed. No one pointed it out. Then, they organized the guild leaders to meet and have the first guild leader conference of Cloud City. The 5 guild leaders were Unsworn Sword of Unsworn 4 Seas, Against the Current of Singing to Wine, Unchung Mutsu of Herding Clouds, Gu Xiaoshang of Between the Rosy Clouds, and Black Index Finger of Black Hand. Unsworn 4 Seas and Against the Current of Singing to Wine were originally a conference, so they were on par with each other. Later on, Unsworn 4 Seas received the competition's reward quest and became the first guild to rise to level 6. Against the Current of Singing to Wine leveled like crazy at that time and became one of the 5 roaches. At the same time, he led his guild to level 6 through his own hard work. He wasn't far behind Unsworn 4 Seas. On the other hand, Herding Clouds was originally a level 4 guild compared to the other two level 5 guilds. They had always lost to the other two guilds. Now that they had risen to level 6, there was still a gap between level 41 and level 41. In terms of guild reputation, they weren't on the same level as the other two guilds. On the other hand, Rosy Clouds was even worse. They were originally a level 3 guild, but they were able to rise to level 6 thanks to Unsworn 4C's help. Everyone in Cloud City knew that Unsworn Sword had been chasing after Gu Xiaoshang to no avail. Black Hand Alliance, on the other hand, was founded by the Black Hand Mercenary Group, the #1 mercenary group in Cloud City. After losing to the 6-man child elite group in the mercenary group competition, the Black Hand Mercenary Group lost all face. They felt that they wouldn't be able to erase this shadow even if they developed a mercenary group, so they decided to become a guild. They started late, but they developed very quickly. They were one step ahead of Rosy Clouds and reached level 6. Those who had paid attention to them said that the Black Hand Alliance was already a level 3 guild when they first appeared. After a few days, they rose to level 4. Everyone guessed that they had purchased a guild from another player. A guild's name wasn't like a player's ID. It could be changed. Other small and medium-sized guilds couldn't do much on their own, so they would rely on the 5 major guilds. These 5 major guilds each had their own advantages. In terms of member strength, Unsworn 4Cs was the strongest. In terms of guild leader prestige, Against the Current was the strongest. In terms of connections, no one dared to look down on Black Index Finger. This guy came from a mercenary group, and the Black Hand Mercenary Group had a good reputation. After operating in Cloud City for so long, he had made a lot of friends. The guild leader of Rosy Clouds, Gu Xiaoshang, was a girl. This was also an advantage. For example, if you wanted Unsworn Sword to join a guild, he would definitely join. In the end, Muyun, a veteran guild, felt that it was more mediocre. Unsworn Sword could see that Against the Current was using this opportunity to push singing and drinking to the throne of the #1 guild in Cloud City. He didn't want Against the Current to succeed. At this time, he wasn't too worried. In his opinion, among the 5 major guilds, other than Against the Current, the other 3 guilds would probably side with him. Gu Xiaoshang was needless to say. Although Unsworn Sword didn't succeed after chasing after him for so long, he still had some friendship with him, and it was still better than Against the Current. As for Black Index Finger, during the Unsworn 4C's mission, most of the mercenary groups withdrew. Black Index Finger died, but the mercenary groups still kept their promise. Unsworn Sword was very grateful for this. After returning to Cloud City, both sides had a good relationship. As for Unchung Matsu, this guy didn't have any friendship with Unsworn Sword, but the problem was that he didn't have any friendship with Against the Current either. It wasn't a secret in Cloud City that these two didn't get along. Thinking about this, Unsworn Sword felt that Against the Current was really a bad move. What's the use of hooking up with these 3 guild leaders? These people are all friends with me, so why wouldn't they stand on my side? Reflection of Years and Wind Star agreed with Unsworn Sword's opinion. At this time, the location of the guild leader conference had already been decided. Unsworn Sword brought 2 people to attend the conference. This guy was a warrior, so he walked slowly. When he arrived at the conference, there were already many people there. Unsworn Sword glanced around and found the 4 guild leaders first. Because the 4 of them were in the center, the other small and medium-sized guild leaders were sitting around them. Unsworn Sword coughed twice. When the people around him saw him, they immediately moved to the side. This subconscious gesture of inviting him to sit in the middle made Unsworn Sword feel extremely satisfied. Guild leader Unsworn, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Against the Current was quite enthusiastic. Sorry, my legs are short. Unsworn Sword smiled. Before you came, we discussed it casually. Everyone agreed that since we're going to cooperate, there needs to be a unified leader. We've already decided on the candidate, and it's you, Guild Leader Unsworn. Don't be shy, we've already decided. We just wanted to inform you, so you have to obey the majority. Ha! Going Against the Current? What a hearty laugh. This caused Unsworn Sword to feel very confused. What was going on? This guy actually took the initiative to give up the position of the leader to him? Could it be that this guy also saw the situation clearly like me and knew that he couldn't compete with me, so he took the initiative to give up the position to show his style and continue to increase his personal charisma? Countless thoughts flashed through Unsworn Sword's mind. Reflection of years nudged him and sent him a message. Han family young master. Unsworn Sword's heart skipped a beat when he heard the name. He looked in the direction Reflection of years nudged him and saw the cleric casually sitting on a wooden stump behind against the current. Only half of his body was exposed. In his hand was never a staff, but a bottle of wine. Although he had no grudges with the child elite group and had a good impression of them, Han family young master was still a demon in everyone's eyes. Extortion, trap, sarcasm, Unsworn Sword's heart trembled when he thought of it. He immediately replied to Reflection of Years' message. Oh, I forgot, this guy is someone who sings while drinking. Damn it, do you think we've fallen into a trap again? Let's be polite first. Reflection of Years said. Unsworn Sword immediately smiled. Guild leader against the current, you're one of the 5 roaches, the top figure in our Cloud City. I think you should be the commander. He, against the current, laughed. I'd like to, but no one agrees. Unsworn Sword still wanted to say something, but Gu Xiaoshang glared at him. Just do it. What are you pretending for, annoying? As soon as the girl he liked spoke, Sword without oath didn't even care about the opinion of the dog-headed strategist. He immediately displayed his manliness and laughed out loud. Since everyone has said so, I have no choice but to accept it. Reflection of Years and Feng Xing were helpless. Their brother was always like this in front of Gu Xiaoshang. Alright, let's discuss how we're going to fight this battle. Against the current said. Unsworn Sword smiled and said, I've just arrived. Let me see who my brothers are first. Although Unsworn Sword said that he was looking for a brother, in reality, he was looking for a sister. When he saw the young master of the Han family, he suddenly realized that it was not enough to just keep an eye on the movements of these guilds. How could he not rope in a powerful person like Thousand Miles Drunk? This guy was a reincarnated amethyst. Where was the reincarnated amethyst? Were they here? Purple Crystal Rebirth was a small, insignificant guild. They weren't in Sworn Sword's friend list, so he didn't try to recruit them. At this time, he didn't know if anyone from the guild had come, and it wasn't appropriate to ask openly. He hoped that he was the only one who noticed Thousand Miles Drunk, who had been holding the fort for a while, so he wanted to do it secretly. In the end, he didn't see anyone from Amethyst, so he sent a message to Reflection of Years and Feng Xing. Did you see Qianli's drunk? The two of them didn't reply. Sword of Unsworn had also finished his round. He hurriedly smiled and said, We're all old friends. All right, let's plan this. Against the current nodded and said, We just did a head count. We have a total of 820 guilds here, with over 170,000 guild members. How do you think we should fight, guildless? Damn, you're waiting for me. Unsworn Sword screamed in his mind. He was just a player. 1,000 guild members was already his limit. Now that 170,000 people had come, who knew what to do? Unsworn Sword suddenly realized that being the boss today wasn't easy. Chapter 666. Most of the players were just commoners. Commanding 170,000 people to fight was something that had never happened before. Not to mention the players, even if it was a random officer from the army, how many of them could have so many subordinates? The number of people in one army group was about 60,000. 170,000 people was equivalent to the strength of 3 army groups. How to fight? Anyone in the game would be dumbfounded if they asked this question. Unsworn Sword snatched this false reputation, but he knew that it was hard to get off. Of course, he could say that everyone would discuss it, but discussion was just a group effort. If no one said anything, wouldn't he have to make the decision himself in the end? This was just a game. If the tactician couldn't come up with an idea, you couldn't threaten them with their heads. Let's figure out the system strategy first, then think of a way to deal with it. Unsworn Sword saw that he was waiting for him to speak, so he had no choice but to say something. Then he looked at the reflection of time. Reflection of years usually had a lot of ideas, but he didn't dare to take responsibility for commanding 170,000 people to PK. He could see that Countercurrent's move was very vicious, pushing Unsworn Sword to this position. 170,000 people PK, this was definitely something that no one could come up with. In the end, would Unsworn Sword still have to come up with a plan? But how much could Unsworn Sword know? In the end, the idea he came up with was probably no different from not coming up with anything. Then the players would go into battle, collapse, and complain. Who would be the target of their complaints? Of course, it would be their commander, Unsworn Sword. If the guild leader was looked down upon, how good could the guild be? Reigning 4C's image would definitely fall. Reflection of Years understood this, but there was nothing he could do. Just as Unsworn Sword said this, Countercurrent immediately said, "Guild leader Unsworn, you have good leadership. Reigning 4C's is the #1 guild in our Cloud City. Isn't it a piece of cake for you to deal with a small fry like the system?" Some of the more honest guild leaders shook their heads at Countercurrent's words. If it was a piece of cake, they wouldn't have been beaten so badly just now. And some of the less virtuous ones could also tell that going against the current was to put the sword of no oath on the bonfire to be roasted, so they all gloated and waited to watch the show. Sword of Unsworn gritted his teeth and went all out. If he still insisted on putting up a front at a time like this, wouldn't he just be asking for trouble? He immediately said, "We're all smart people. We have 170,000 brothers, and we're all gamers. Who has commanded such a large army before? If you really want me to make a decision, then I have no idea. Let's discuss it together." In a sense, Unsworn Sword's words could also be understood as him admitting that he was not competent enough to be the commander-in-chief. Of course, he wouldn't say this out loud. What he was looking forward to was getting everyone's understanding. Then, they would really come up with ideas together. Then they would assign manpower, coordinate, and so on. He was still the chief commander. Unsworn Sword was dreaming, but how could others give him such a huge advantage? Against the Current smiled and said, "Guild leader Lifeless is too humble, too polite. If you continue to be so polite, then I'll do it." "Then you do it," Unsworn Sword said. Since Against the Current was still mocking him, he countered. Against the Current nodded and said, "Then I'll do it." Unsworn Sword was dumbfounded. Why did Against the Current really dare to take this hot potato? It seemed like he already had a plan in mind, but he still pushed the position of commander-in-chief to Unsworn Sword. Now, it seemed like he had no choice but to take it back. He was basically trying to embarrass Unsworn Sword. "I gave you a chance, but you can't do it, so I'll do it." Against the Current not only gained a good reputation, but also the position of commander-in-chief, killing two birds with one stone. Unsworn Sword looked at Reflection of Time blankly. Reflection of Time sent him a private message. "Does this guy have an idea?" Unsworn Sword suddenly reacted. "Damn, don't tell me this guy has grasped some key mission?" Time's Reflection also realized what was going on. They firmly believed that none of the players had the talent to command 170,000 people. Against the Current's confidence in taking on this task could only mean that he had grasped some key mission that could decide the outcome of this city. From the simple actions and oaths of the NPCs before the battle, this city battle itself was like a large-scale group mission, so it wasn't impossible for there to be a small plot hidden within it. What about our people? Did the people we sent out find any clues? Unsworn Sword hurriedly asked. No, everyone is looking for NPCs at the resurrection point and the camp. Most of the quests they received were logistics, food, and the like. I can't see any key missions, Reflection of Time said. Against the Current, they started in the direction of the West Gate. Send a few people over there to scout, Unsworn Sword said. I'll personally lead some people. Reflection of Time said. All right. Unsworn Sword nodded. Reflection of Time quietly left from behind Unsworn Sword. He wasn't the guild leader, so no one paid attention to his actions. At this time, Against the Current had become the new leader of the guild leader circle, and he was gathering everyone to listen to his speech. Everyone, since we're going to cooperate, a unified command is necessary, but we're not the same guild, and the game doesn't have a world channel, so I suggest that we form a party first. We can then use the party channel to communicate with each other, and then each guild leader can use their own guild channel to give orders to their brothers. What do you think? When everyone heard this, they all praised against the current's brilliant idea, coming up with such a reliable plan as soon as he became the guild leader. Many people also looked at Unsworn Sword with disdain. Unsworn Sword's face was full of tears. What kind of brilliant idea was this? They had used this method during the expedition to Sunset City. At that time, they had gathered the mercenary leaders into one team and managed them. There were mercenary leaders present who had participated in that incident, but obviously there was no reason for them to suddenly come out and say, "This method has been used before." Sword of Oaths only felt wronged. I think we need to understand our opponents more deeply. Just now, our Westgate side lost too quickly, so we didn't have any information on the system. How about your side? Against the current asked. Simpson. The Northgate players all said. They didn't dare to move at first because of the giant rock, so it was better not to talk about it. Actually, even if they didn't talk about it, Westgate's people knew about it. Against the current said, that's why. I think we need to organize some probing attacks and get a better grasp of the system's subordinates, attack methods, and so on. Yes, that makes sense. Everyone nodded. Unsworn Sword felt even more wronged. What kind of bullshit plan is this? How are you going to command these 170,000 people? Even now, Against the Current still hasn't said anything. Against the Current continued to speak step by step. Leave the task of testing the waters to us. Everyone, take a short break. All the guild leaders felt even more touched. What probing? This was actually just going up to die and testing the system's reaction. Although everyone knew that there was no punishment for dying, which was why Against the Current was so generous. But no matter what, they were going to die, so what else could they say? Unsworn Sword didn't want to let Against the Current take the lead, so he jumped out and said, "We can't just sit around, let's go as well." That's good. Against the Current smiled. He understood what Unsworn Sword was thinking, but he didn't say anything. The other 3 guilds were level 6 guilds, but in terms of the quality of their members, they really couldn't compete with these 2 guilds. So, when these 2 guilds were bickering with each other, they didn't say anything. Guild leader Unsworn, should we work together and charge? Against the Current said to Unsworn Sword with a smile. Unsworn Sword curled his lips and looked like he didn't want to work with Against the Current. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Feng Xing was in an awkward situation. Time had already left just now, and now he was the only one beside Sword Without Oath. Yet, Sword Without Oath still had to act like he was calling out to his friends, causing Feng Xing, who was the only one who was maintaining his imposing manner, to feel very sad. Against the Current called out to the guild leaders from behind, "Then let us and Reigning 4Cs test out the system's attack. Everyone, stay here and keep an eye out." All the guild leaders nodded. The 2 guild leaders left and gathered their people. Against the Current sent a message to Unsworn Sword, "Guild leader Unsworn, how do we fight?" Unsworn Sword thought for a moment and said, "Let's take turns and use the tactics we're good at. We'll use archers as our main force, and you guys use mages as your main force. Let's see if the system treats us differently." "Yes, it's decided. You guys go first?" "Okay." Unsworn Sword thought of taking turns. Testing the system was only one of the ideas, and the other was to compete with Against the Current. Against the Current's archery, Unsworn Sword's main force was sharpshooters. Their mobility was much better than Singing for Wine's mages. Even if they lost in the end, they would have a much easier time than Singing for Wine. This was not something that could be said openly, but after returning to their own guild and gathering their sharpshooters, Unsworn Sword gave them a good speech. After all, this wasn't a personal grudge between Unsworn Sword and Singing Against Wine. Enmity was part of Overlord's guild culture. When everyone heard that they were going to compete with Singing Against Wine, their morale soared. Nodding in satisfaction, Unsworn Sword dispatched another batch of clerics and archers to form a two-tier team to provide support from the rear. Everyone keep your distance. Be careful of the catapult's boulders. Once you're within attack range, stop advancing and attack. Unsworn Sword set the strategy. Move out. Unsworn Sword waved his sword and led the party. Although he was not an archer, as the guild leader, it was not appropriate for him to watch from the back. He was currently in the middle of the cleric party, shouting to boost everyone's morale. The guild leaders of the various guilds had already communicated their intentions to the guild members. Everyone knew that against the current was going to test the waters with their attacks. On days when there were no major events, it was rare to see against the current's complete archery formation. At this moment, it had attracted a large number of players to observe. The players used their appraisal skills to admire the equipment of the sharpshooters from reigning the four seas. As expected of a big guild. Look at their equipment. Most of the small and medium-sized guilds let out envious cries. As for the players who were not even level 41, they did not even have the chance to be envious. They could not even appraise the equipment. Careful, careful. Watch your distance. Unsworn Sword warned in the guild channel. The first boulder that killed Black Rose was still on the ground. This boulder was also the furthest away from all the other boulders. Naturally, it was regarded as the furthest range of the catapults. Seeing that they were about to step into this area, Against the Current became cautious. Spread out a little more. Unsworn Sword said. The sharpshooters spread out in all directions. At this moment, there were only 100 of them attacking. There was more than enough space for everyone to throw 4 to 5 boulders at the same time. It's coming! Suddenly, someone shouted. As expected, the sound of a mechanism on top of the wall rang out. Boulders flew from the top of the wall, arcing through the air towards Against the Current's players. Reigning the Four Seas was prepared for this, and they had plenty of room to dodge. This time, they were completely different from the catapults that had smashed them into a mess. More than 100 sharpshooters aimed at where the stones were coming from, and they dodged left, right, front, and back. Surprisingly, not a single one of them was hit. Alright, that's it. Let's continue forward. Unsworn Sword shouted. The sharpshooters responded with a roar. The attack speed of the catapults was not high, and the boulders were large targets. Under such circumstances, it was not difficult to dodge. Everyone realized that this kind of attack was very powerful against a densely packed army, but it seemed a little out of place against the current attack, which was like a group of scattered soldiers. Forward, forward, forward. Be careful. We're about to enter the archer's attack range. Everyone be careful. Prepare to attack. Unsworn Sword excitedly commanded his men to advance. Even a short-legged warrior like him could easily dodge the boulders. This made him very excited. The catapults had the longest range, followed by the archers on top of the wall, and then the mages. The range of the system's archers was the same as that of the players. Unsworn Sword was prepared to use his own archer formation to fight the system's wall soldiers. The catapults were no longer a threat to them. However, at this moment, the sound of another wave of catapults rang out. Some of the more attentive players noticed that the sound of the stones flying through the air was slightly different this time. The sharpshooters of Against the Current raised their eyes and prepared to dodge the incoming boulders. Suddenly, their eyes widened in shock. This time, it was not the boulders that were larger than humans, but countless boulders the size of heads. The smaller the boulders did not mean that they could fly faster, but the number of boulders had increased. The catapults had loaded an uncountable number of such large boulders onto them, creating a storm. It was not that the players did not want to dodge, but the falling boulders were too dense. Whether they could dodge them or not depended on luck, not skill. This wave of boulders caused the players to stagger. However, the boulders were smaller, and their attacks were much weaker. Even with the boulders falling from such a high height, the players still had a lot of HP. The priests that Unsworn Sword had sent earlier finally had the chance to perform, and they quickly healed the players. The catapult's attack frequency was not that high, and the priests managed to pull everyone's HP back. However, at this time, the second wave of attacks arrived. Another boulder fell, and another chance for the priests to perform. Guild leader, this won't do. We'll run out of mana sooner or later. A priest hurriedly advised Unsworn Sword. Unsworn Sword was unwilling to give up. Seeing another wave of boulders falling, the guild members looked around and suddenly had an idea. Everyone, hide behind the boulders. Everyone reacted. Some crouched down, and some hid behind the boulders. Only the sound of the boulders hitting the boulders could be heard. Everyone touched the bruises on their heads, and they were all scared out of their wits. Should we continue forward? Everyone asked Unsworn Sword. What's there to be afraid of? There's no loss even if we die. Let's use the boulders as cover and continue forward. At Unsworn Sword's command, everyone jumped out of the catapults and continued forward. When they saw the boulders falling, they quickly hid behind the boulders again. Finally, relying on this method, the 4 Seas archers approached the attacking range of the archers at the top of the wall. As the first arrow flew, Unsworn Sword shouted, "Attack!" The target that Unsworn Sword ordered to attack was not the archers at the top of the wall, but the warriors and knights at the bottom of the wall. This group of infantrymen was already within the attacking range of the 4 Seas archers, but they still stood still. The goal of the 4 Seas archers was just to test the waters. They did not expect to create a perfect formation of arrows. Instead, they looked for opportunities to shoot at the infantrymen. However, the infantrymen were already on guard. The front row retreated, and the back row stepped forward. They stabbed their shields into the ground, and the arrows were ineffective. The archers at the top of the wall were all hidden behind the wall. Even when they attacked, only half of their bodies were exposed. Unsworn Sword ordered the archers to attack a few more times, but it was to no avail. Just as he was at his wits' end, several screams came from beside him. Unsworn Sword hurriedly looked over and saw a group of masked assassins in black suddenly appearing in the 4 Seas formation. Each of them was a sharpshooter, and they were mercilessly attacking. No matter how strong the sharpshooters were, they were not good at close combat. Many people habitually tried to pull away from their opponents, but they were immediately attacked by the archers at the top of the wall. Under such attacks, the sharpshooters were killed one after another. Unsworn Sword was burning with anxiety, but at this time, an assassin also appeared beside him in stealth. Unsworn Sword, of course, had rich experience in close combat. After this exchange, he knew that the strength of the assassins was quite strong. Few players would be a match for them in a one-on-one fight. Unsworn Sword barely managed to kill the assassin who attacked him, but he relied on several priests to take care of him, the guild master. The other sharpshooters did not have such good luck. They were killed one after another. Some of them wanted to retreat, but after a few steps, they were attacked by the stones of the catapults. Unsworn Sword let out a long sigh. He knew that this was the end of their test. Butterfly Knot, Saturday's update, Chapter 666, is so smooth. Chapter 667. Reigning 4 Seas probing attack only lasted a few seconds before they were crushed by the system's pincer attack. Thinking about the 800 guild players behind them, Unsworn Sword did not give the order to retreat. They would not suffer any losses even if they died, so they might as well fight to the last man. Reigning 4 Seas no longer had the chance to take a step forward. The sudden appearance of the assassins was more than enough to deal with. In addition to the ranged attacks from the top of the wall, the 2 rows of infantry at the base of the wall did not even have to move before Reigning 4 Seas' army was completely annihilated. When Unsworn Sword came out of the resurrection point, he saw that Feng Xing was already there waiting for him. After a short pause, he suddenly complained, "You saw that we were ambushed by assassins, why didn't you bring anyone to help us?" Reigning 4 Seas did not go all out in this battle. He only sent out the archers and priests, while the other melee players stayed behind to watch the battle. Feng Xing was also stunned for a moment. "You didn't say anything." "I can't see clearly because I'm closely involved. You should have seen the situation better from the outside. You should have made a decision at a time like this. Even if you're not confident, you should have reminded me." Unsworn Sword said. Feng Xing did not say anything. He felt that Unsworn Sword's words made sense. They might have been too focused on the enemy to think too much when they were charging in. He was supervising the battle from the back and should have sent reinforcements at that time. The enemy's assassins were not many. If reigning 4C's melee players could have helped at that time, they wouldn't have been defeated in this wave of attacks. Unsworn Sword sighed, feeling that it was a great pity. At that moment, Countercurrent's voice rang in his ears. Guild leader Unsworn, you've worked hard. Countercurrent estimated that Unsworn Sword was about to die and hurried over to the resurrection point, just in time to greet him. As for whether he was here to console him or to watch him make a fool of himself, only he knew. Unsworn Sword was vexed, but he would not show his dejection in front of his competitors. When he heard Countercurrent's voice, he immediately straightened his chest and adjusted his equipment. He turned his head with a solemn expression and said, Guild leader Countercurrent, the system is not easy to deal with this time. Yes, we all saw it. Following Countercurrent were a few other presidents of the convention, and all of them had solemn expressions on their faces. Unhindered's trip to the 4Cs wasn't for nothing. The catapults can still attack like this, and they even have assassins hiding in ambush. This is something we've never seen in our previous battles, Unchung Mutsu, the guild leader of the Cloud Shepherds, said. Unsworn Sword sent a heartfelt gaze of gratitude to their guild leader, who had spoken up for them. He wasn't the kind of person who only knew how to go against the flow. He was now seriously analyzing the pitiful information that he had obtained by sacrificing himself. If the catapult's attacks are like the ones that appeared just now, I don't think there's much to worry about. With the support of the priests, they should be able to hold on for a while. After they come into contact with the enemy's soldiers, the catapult's attacks will definitely stop. Otherwise, no matter what kind of stones they use, they will hurt their own people. Everyone nodded. Although we have 170,000 people, it's too much of a waste to charge like a swarm of bees. Perhaps the system predicted the number of players in each main city, so it set up a strategy that would be targeted at them. I suggest that we arrange our players according to the size of the area and try to widen the formation as much as possible. Our brothers who come out can be substitutes at the back. When the brothers who charge first fall, the substitutes will follow, and the brothers who fall will rush back from the resurrection point as soon as possible. I don't believe that we can't break through this cycle. As Unsworn Sword spoke, he actually managed to make some sense out of it. When he looked back, he was quite impressed with himself. Originally, he just wanted to casually analyze the situation to prove that although he died quickly, his death wasn't in vain. However, the more he spoke, the more ideas he had. After explaining the rotation system of the main force and substitutes, Unsworn Sword felt that it was really amazing. Black Index Finger, who had been quiet all this while as if he wasn't used to being a guild leader, suddenly sighed and said, Everyone, the 170,000 we have is actually just a theoretical number. As for the actual situation, I've asked people to look around. We have more than 800 guilds, and more than half of them are beginner guilds. Some of them don't even have 50 people. Many of them are around level 30, and some are even wearing white equipment. Of these 170,000 people, not all of them are as elite as the members of Unhindered and Singing to Wine. It's hard to say whether or not a portion of them can be counted as combat power in this battle. I'm sure everyone has a rough idea of the strength of the system guards. They are quite strong. If we were to fight them one-on-one, I'm afraid that no one here would dare to say that they would definitely win, right? Yes. Everyone nodded. Unsworn Sword didn't say anything. He had really fought one-on-one just now, and if it wasn't for the support of a few clerics, he would have really lost. However, I think that Brother Unsworn's suggestion is very good. I think we should seriously investigate the members. If they aren't strong enough, we might as well not let them participate in the battle. Otherwise, it might cause problems in our coordination. Black Index Finger said. That's true, but I don't know if these people are willing. Unsworn Sword said. As soon as he said this, the other guild leaders all sighed. They were all guild leaders, so they understood the difficulty. Their levels were low and they were weak, but they were still players. To put it bluntly, they were on the same level as the 5 roaches. If they were willing to follow the arrangement and not cause trouble, it was considered reasonable. However, if they refused to comply and wanted to play in the city war, there was really no reason to stop them. Black Index Finger laughed and said, "There are a total of 4 gates in the main city. We'll focus on 1 gate, and the other 3 gates are empty. Those who are not willing to cooperate with us can go play in the other gates. Even now, there are still many guilds who are not willing to cooperate with us, and are trying to find their own way in the other gates, right?" Both Sword of Unsworn and Against the Current felt their hearts skip a beat. Black Index Finger's meaning was clear. On the surface, it was to reduce the number of members and get rid of all the slackers. However, it seemed like it was trying to concentrate as many points as possible in the hands of these people. Anyone with a bit of knowledge could see that in order to take down this city, everyone had to work together. A guild with only 1,000 or so people would not be able to do much on their own. Moreover, other than these 5 guilds, there were no guilds with thousands of people in Cloud City. "Everyone, don't worry. You can leave this task to us. We, Black Hand, came from a mercenary group, so we know quite a lot of people," Black Index Finger said. "What do you think?" Against the Current looked at the others. Only then did Unsworn Sword realize why Countercurrent had gathered so many people to the resurrection point to pick him up. Actually, it was because they did not want too many people to talk. Right now, the ones who had come were all the guild leaders of the conference, so they avoided the guild leaders of the smaller guilds. They just needed to decide on the plan, and then those people would follow along. "I have no objections." Unchung Matsu was the first to express his opinion. Following that, quite a few other guild leaders agreed with Black Index Finger. In the end, Unsworn Sword and Against the Current also nodded in agreement. With that, the matter was settled. Black Index Finger immediately left to gather manpower and conduct a detailed selection of the people before him. Guild Leader Unsworn. At this time, Unchung Matsu came to Unsworn Sword's side and pulled him. Unsworn Sword saw that he had something to say, so he did not reply. Instead, he sent a message to him. "What is it? Don't you think that Black Index Finger came prepared?" Unchung Matsu said. "What do you mean?" "There are thousands of guilds in Cloud City, and we have 820 here. Out of the 820 guild leaders, how many names have you called?" Unchung Matsu asked. There are probably only a few dozen of them." Unsworn Sword reacted after answering the question. Previously, when Against the Current discussed with him, he said that he wanted to contact all the guilds in Cloud City, and Unsworn Sword did his best. However, the guild leaders that he knew were at least level 4 or 5 guilds. How could he know those newly formed, beginner guilds? But now that more than half of the 800 guilds were small guilds, how did he contact them? Who knew so many small guild leaders? Against the Current, or was it Black Index Finger? No matter who it was, to be able to gather so many small guilds in an instant, this person must have prepared beforehand. At the very least, they must have gone to the guild building to prepare for class and memorized the information of all the guilds and guild leaders in Cloud City. To be willing to put in so much effort, they must be planning something big in this city war. For this Black Index Finger to dare to take on this task, he must know at least a few hundred guild leaders, right? Even if he came from a mercenary group, his connections shouldn't reach this level, right? Actually, his so-called connections are similar to ours, just a bit more famous, and more people know us. But on the other hand, we don't really know much, Unchung Matsu said. "Yes, what you said makes sense. This guy, it seems like he wants to do something big," Unsworn Sword said. "We need to be more careful," Unchung Matsu said. "Yes, I wonder if that Against the Current kid knows about it," Unsworn Sword said. "Hard to say, maybe they've been working together for a long time. Otherwise, who would call so many small guilds in the first place? You only know a few dozen guilds, and so do I. Especially these small guilds, I can't call them." Unchung Matsu said. "Yes, I really didn't notice this at first." Unsworn Sword nodded his head. He realized that after winning the competition and completing the chain quest, reigning the 4 seas seemed to be a bit too arrogant. They didn't put anyone else in their eyes, and they thought that the championship was already in their bag. When he thought about how against the current, black index finger, or all of them had made such detailed preparations for this city war, Unsworn Sword felt very uneasy. He really wondered if he had fallen into a trap. When he thought of a trap, Unsworn Sword subconsciously wanted to look for Han Family Young Master, but this time, Han Family Young Master didn't appear with Against the Current. He didn't appear, but the message still arrived. Unsworn Sword thought. It was the same to think positively or negatively of this matter. As long as he was willing, he could create a bunch of illusions to comfort himself or scare himself. The attack at the North Gate temporarily came to a halt, and Against the Current shut his mouth about the wave of probing that his guild should have. Unsworn Sword wanted to see what this guy was planning, so he didn't say anything and pretended to disappear. At the same time, he kept in touch with Time's reflection to see if there were any discoveries. At the same time, he was also thinking about the details of what happened here. The player army didn't move, and Gu Fei and Sword Demon were so lonely that they stood under the city gate and yawned. They didn't make it in time to catch White and Black, and the second wave of attack was all from Against the Four Seas. They were waiting for the third wave, but the players still didn't move. They're probably thinking about how to deal with it. I don't think this city is going to be easy, Sword Demon said. The wave of stone attacks just now was really dense. There was no way to dodge. It's just too fake. A stone as big as a head, falling from such a high wall and hitting your head, won't you die? Gu Fei said. You can't say that. Everyone in the game isn't an ordinary person. They're all strong warriors. Anyone who gets smashed to death is an ordinary person, Sword Demon said. That's true. If it was me, I wouldn't die either. Gu Fei didn't think he was an ordinary person. The players did not move for a long time. The two of them were thinking if they should find a way to sneak into the crowd of players. In any case, the players would definitely not be able to guess that they were actually spies from the system. While they were discussing, they suddenly heard a creaking sound coming from the entrance beside them. The two of them turned around and looked at the entrance. They saw a person pushing a two-wheeled wooden cart laboriously towards the entrance. The closer they got, the more the two of them could see each other's faces, and they were both shocked. Little Ray! Gu Fei and Sword Demon said in unison. In front of the two of them was the first celebrity in Cloud City to become famous throughout the parallel world, the owner of Little Ray's bar, Comrade Little Ray. And Little Ray also recognized the two great generals of Child Elite Group who had been occupying his bar all year round. Qianli? Sword Ghost? There was a look of surprise on Xiaolei's face as he called out their names. Sword Demon reacted quickly to things related to the game and immediately asked, You also have a camp? After hearing this, Little Ray was startled. How did you know? But then a look of realization appeared on his face. You too also have a camp, so this city war was left in the city? Which camp are you in? Sword Demon quickly asked. The Commercial Trade Alliance. What about the two of you? Little Ray asked. I'm in the Assassin Alliance. He doesn't know, Sword Demon said. Doesn't know? Little Ray was puzzled. Gu Fei was embarrassed. I joined in muddle-headedly. No one told me this was a camp in advance. I didn't know who to ask afterwards. Little Ray, how did you join this camp? Sword Demon asked. Although Sword Demon wasn't Brother Yu, he would also study the game settings, just not as crazy as Brother Yu. I'm also confused. Once I went to the Commercial Association to accept a mission, and suddenly they sent me a document saying that I'm a member of the Commercial Trade Alliance, Little Ray said. You also do missions? Gu Fei interrupted. He was quite surprised. He thought that Little Ray was stationed in Little Ray's bar 24 hours a day. Once in a while, Little Ray said. What's the reward for the camp? Sword Demon asked. The tax paid by the tavern is 20% lower than before, Little Ray said. This. In the eyes of Sword Demon, such a reward was even worse than garbage. Then he asked, Is there no skill type? Skill? I chose a bartending recipe. Where's Gongzi? I haven't seen him for a long time. This was the most extraordinary thing about Little Ray. Compared to everyone who hated the Han family young master, he really liked this person. Most tavern owners loved drunkards. is outside the city now. Sword Demon said. Come to my place when you have time. I'm the only one in the city who has this new wine, even the System Tavern doesn't have it, Little Ray said excitedly. Is that so? Gu Fei responded, then patted the big barrel on Little Ray's wooden cart and said, What's this? Little Ray said, Isn't this city war to divide the sphere of influence? My friends and I, who were also opening shops in the city, came to the conclusion that the area of influence was closely related to our shop, so we formed a temporary guild to participate in the city war. As a result, I was thrown into the city by myself as soon as I came online. I looked everywhere but couldn't find anyone. I sent a message to my friends saying that they were enemies, so I couldn't send it. Later, I ran to the business association, and they sent me a mission to transport military supplies to the front. Military supplies? What is it? Gu Fei patted the barrel again, and as he patted, he put his head on it to listen. It sounds like water. There's a cover. Sword Demon pointed to the barrel. Gu Fei immediately wanted to take a look, and Little Ray was anxious. Hey, the quest item, don't break it. I'm just looking, how can it break? Gu Fei said as he lifted it, and his face turned red. He loosened his hand and said, I can't lift it. Little Ray let out a sigh of relief. He was afraid that these two guys would do something again, so he pushed the cart around them and said, I'll send it to the quest location first, and then I'll talk to you guys when I come back. Go ahead. Gu Fei waved his hand to let them go. Little Ray pushed his wooden cart away, and Sword Demon suddenly said to Gu Fei, I have a quest, Little Ray also has a quest, and maybe your camp also has a quest. Well, that's right. I don't know what's going on here, and there's no movement for a long time. I'll go to the city to see if there's a quest. Gu Fei said. But Gu Fei said as he entered the city again. His wanted license was issued by the Wanted Quest office, so his camp should be related to this organization. Gu Fei's heart was a little cold. His camp couldn't be a jailer or a catcher, right? What kind of camp was this? It didn't have any spirit at all. Six Fan School? It couldn't be called that in the game. As Gu Fei thought about it, he arrived at the Wanted Quest office. Pushing open the door, he was greeted by a familiar scene. However, as soon as he spoke to the NPC, the latter informed him that this was a matter of life and death for the city. He no longer had the energy to pay attention to such petty crimes. He needed to find something more meaningful. Besides this place, Gu Fei thought about it, and the only place that had an intersection with his quest was the main city's council hall, so he walked towards the council hall. This was a place that ordinary players had no right to enter, and Gu Fei was easily let go after showing his wanted license. Gu Fei walked around the hall twice, and remembered the incident in Shoyu City. That person seemed to be from the guard? After thinking of this, Gu Fei grabbed a guard, asked where the guard was, and walked over there. Butterfly Knot. Some students have reported that there was a calculation error before, and the guild was written as 82. Butterfly looked at his own Word document. There were 820 guilds, and I don't know why a 0 disappeared. Here's a statement, 170,000 people, 820 guilds, 82 is impossible. On average, each guild needs 2,000 people, and the highest level 6 guild is 1,050 people. Even if all 82 guilds are level 6, there are only 80,000 people, not to mention there are only 5 level 6 guilds in Cloud City. Chapter 668. The guards of Cloud Peak City and Xiaowu City seem to be carved from the same mold. A bunch of miscellaneous soldiers and a captain who looked like a proper person. In this so-called autumn of the city war, they still pretended to exist in the office. As soon as Gu Fei entered the door, the captain stood up. Qianli is drunk, you're here. In the game, an NPC taking the initiative to speak to you was already a kind of quest prompt. After all, there were countless NPCs in and out of the city. If the player took the initiative to ask, hello, do you need help? It would be a bit too much. So in most quests, when the player slipped past the NPC would take the initiative to speak. Players who were familiar with the situation would immediately know, there is a door here. However, for daily quests or wanted quests, The NPC generally didn't have this kind of service. At this time, the captain took the initiative to speak. It seemed that this was a special setting during the city war. Thinking about this, Gu Fei quickly moved closer and followed the NPC's words, "I'm here, I'm here. Cloud City is being attacked by a group of mobs. As a member of the guard, you should take up your own weapon and defend your home." The guard captain of Cloud City said sincerely. Gu Fei was startled. The mystery of his faction was about to be revealed. It turned out that the guard was a faction. But he took the lead to cause trouble in Xiafog City and killed the captain of the guard there. How should this be counted? Could it be that because the last hit wasn't him, it shouldn't be counted? This didn't seem to be the rule in the parallel world. Who started the fight, the damage output during the fight, and the last hit, these three factors were considered comprehensively. To kill Giordano, Gu Fei should be the main person responsible. However, there was no point in dwelling on this at this time. It was obvious that the guard did not treat Gu Fei as an outsider. After Gu Fei quickly expressed his willingness to obey the organization to protect his homeland, the guard captain of Cloud City was pleased to give him a task. Now there is a group of rioters who have kidnapped the civil engineer of Cloud City, Gilkino. They want to use his talent to dismantle the defense structure of Cloud City. Now that the city guards are short of manpower, the rescue mission has to be handed over to the guard squad. Qianli is drunk. Go, stop their plot and save Gilkino. Gu Fei listened to the NPC's words. The guard and the city guards were not from the same system. The quest asked him to stop the mob. Weren't the mob all players? Fighting with others was an endless joy. Gu Fei liked to PK with others, so he happily accepted. According to the scouts, Gilkino is currently being held here. Go, bring people to rescue him. The captain said. Bring people? Gu Fei was confused. There were only him, the sword demon and little Ray in the city. Why would he bring people? He agreed and pondered at the same time. The captain had already given his closing words. I wish you good luck. There was no need to be polite with the NPC. Gu Fei did not say goodbye and went out the door. He did not expect to hear footsteps behind him. When he turned around, he saw that the 4 soldiers who were originally in the guard squad room had followed him out the door. Gu Fei did not care at first, but when he went downstairs and left the meeting hall, he found that the 4 soldiers were still following him. Gu Fei was puzzled. Why are they following me? To rescue Gilkino. The 4 soldiers bowed to Gu Fei and answered respectfully. So there really were people. They actually sent me 4 NPCs. What is this? Pets? Gu Fei did not know much about the game. It was a pity that he recognized these 4 soldiers as pets. But these pets did not make Gu Fei happy at all. These 4 soldiers as helpers made him feel that the difficulty of the mission had increased. According to Gu Fei's thinking, the players outside the city did not know that he was an enemy, so he could walk among them openly. But now that he was followed by 4 system soldiers, wouldn't he become the target of public criticism? But then he thought about it again. Most people would not think that these 4 soldiers were led by him. When he walked into the crowd, the players could attack him as they pleased. He would let these 4 people fend for themselves. Fortunately, these 4 soldiers were just system NPCs without any thoughts. If a living person knew of Gu Fei's thoughts, they would really die from anger. They were willing to risk their lives for him. He had already made up his mind to not care if they lived or died. After Gu Fei left the council hall, he sent a message to Sword Demon. I received a mission. How is it outside? Is there a fight? No, what mission did you receive? Sword Demon asked. Save people. They even sent me helpers. Gu Fei said. What helpers? Sword Demon asked. For soldiers. Gu Fei said. There's such a thing? Come and take a look. It was common for the system to send NPCs to follow the players. Wasn't it like the chain quest from Reigning the 4 Seas? It was an escort quest. But the NPCs were sent to help the players fight. Moreover, there were 4 of them. Sword Demon had never heard of such a thing. The 2 met up in the city. The 4 soldiers followed Gu Fei closely. At this time, Gu Fei stood down and talked to Sword Demon. The 4 soldiers stood in a square behind him and stood orderly. It's just these 4? Hey, this is new. I've never heard of them. Sword Demon walked up and looked at the NPC curiously. The NPC didn't have any psychological qualities. He didn't care about Sword Demon's look at him at all. I have to hurry. My mission is on time. After Gu Fei received the mission and left, a countdown appeared in the mission list. There was a total of 2 hours. The parallel world map was too big. Usually, it would take a lot of time just to travel in the game. A 2-hour mission time wasn't long. Where are we going to save people? Sword Demon asked. The captain's service was very good. He gave him the coordinates and a map. The map was not very clear, but the coordinates were more important. Gu Fei said the coordinates, and Sword Ghost calculated that it was a little far away. He quickly nodded and said, "Yes, we have to hurry. I'll go with you." Sword Ghost didn't have a chance to look for white and black, so he had nothing to do. The north gate is still the same. No one is moving? Gu Fei asked. Yes. We can't go out like that. It's too conspicuous. We have to go to the other 3 gates. Gu Fei said. These coordinates should be closest to the west gate. Let's go out from the west gate. Sword Demon suggested. The 2 of them walked toward the west gate. Along the way, Sword Ghost clicked his tongue in wonder at the 4 guards. I wonder how strong these 4 guys are? Sword Demon said. Let's try. Gu Fei said. Sword Demon asked. Gu Fei pointed at Sword Demon. Attack. The 4 guards were really obedient. They immediately pulled out their swords and charged at Sword Demon. Gu Fei laughed. You try. Sword Demon was flustered by his sudden attack. He hurriedly dodged 2 attacks and shouted, How can I try? What if I attack and kill them? Kill them then kill them. They're a burden anyway. Let's see if you've made any progress these past few days. Gu Fei said. Sword Demon heard this and became spirited. These past 2 days, he had been fighting monsters according to Gu Fei's instructions and felt more and more comfortable. Using these methods to fight monsters might not be as efficient as he wanted, but Sword Demon was already strongly aware of the huge changes this method would bring in PK. What's more, the inefficiency of leveling was only because he hadn't reached the level yet. If he could reach Gu Fei's level, his efficiency would definitely be amazing. How could Sword Demon not see the foundation of this efficient leveling method? However, although Sword Demon had fighting spirit, he was currently majoring in a one-on-one course. With each additional opponent, the difficulty would increase exponentially. Sword Demon once courageously pulled 2 monsters to practice, but he almost lost his life. Later, he practiced hard for a few days and was planning to take 2 more to practice. Today, came directly. The 4 soldiers also attacked and defended. The 4 people still stood in a square, but they surrounded Sword Demon in the middle. 4 swords slashed down from 4 angles. Sword Demon had done his best and dodged 3 swords, but was hit by the 4th sword. The more Sword Demon practiced, the more he understood. It was clear that with his current level, it was too difficult to use this method to deal with these 4. But he couldn't just give in after 1 move, right? Sword Demon's tenacity came again. He clenched his teeth and persevered. Gu Fei understood people better than him. After 2 rounds, he basically predicted the situation. He waved his hand, "Stop attacking." The 4 soldiers immediately put away their swords and stopped. Sword Demon looked over blankly. Gu Fei said, "Even if you can't kill them, you still have a mission. Hurry up." Sword Demon was quite ashamed. The skills of the NPCs in the system were basically the same. When it came to their strength, it generally looked at them in numbers such as attack, speed, health, defense, and whether they had any special skills. Although Sword Demon only lasted 2 rounds, he still took 2 swords. After looking at the damage, he said, "Attack is quite average, speed isn't fast, health and defense, I don't know, but looking at this attack and speed, it's the strength of a normal monster. And why else would the system send you 4 missed assassins?" Gu Fei said. "You don't say. Today I went to the Thief Guild. Because of the faction, I found out that there is a secret area in the Thief Guild, which is the territory of the Assassin Alliance. There are all kinds of NPC assassins there, And I think there is one that looks like a mist assassin. Sword Demon said. But it can't be the one who wrote the diary, right? Gu Fei said. You got lost in Cloud Fog City again. The sword ghost laughed. As the two spoke, they were already out of the West Gate. The West Gate was not like the North Gate. Sword of Unsworn went against the flow. They gathered guilds, and some people were willing to work together to command them, while others were willing to continue to have their own sovereignty. Most of these people who were unwilling to go were small to medium guilds. This was because people who understood the situation knew that even if the big guilds joined the alliance, they would have a lot of status and sovereignty, and the weaker guilds could only follow orders from behind. Many people didn't like this kind of feeling. They would rather have a small fight and just have fun. These players were relaxed, and there were quite a few of them. At this time, the West Gate was in full swing. So what if they died? They didn't lose anything. They could revive at the revival point, repair their equipment, and then continue. These leisurely players paid the price of death, which indirectly formed the plan of Sword of Unsworn's side. When one row fell, another row would take over, and it would be a battle of attrition with the system. And in the process of continuous fighting, what rock-shattering attacks? An assassin lying in ambush. They had all seen these methods before. When Gu Fei and Sword Demon went out of the West Gate, the players here once again rushed to the bottom of the city wall, causing the guards below to charge and kill them. Without a unified command and a unified plan, the players didn't know if their attacks had shaken the system's defense. In any case, they didn't back down and were having fun as they died and got back up again and again. Although they didn't form an alliance through formal negotiations, they also built a comradely revolutionary friendship in this kind of battle. When they saw the players around them being attacked, they would take the initiative to help. After that, they looked at each other and smiled. They didn't care who the other party was, and they didn't care if the other party stole their guild's points. Compared to the North Gate, their sacrifices were more tragic, but they fought very happily. Because to them, whether they lived or died, it was fun. Hey, it's lively here! Gu Fei exclaimed. Yeah. It looks like someone at the North Gate is giving orders to control the players' attacks. Although it's messy here, it's quite fun to watch. Sword Demon said. It's not easy to fight like this. Gu Fei said. Where should we find a place to sneak over? Sword Demon counted the coordinates while calculating the direction. Don't worry about it, just charge into the crowd. If someone attacks these four guys, pretend we don't know them. Gu Fei said. Why? Sword Demon asked. These four guys will expose our identity. They'll be a burden. Gu Fei said. That's too wasteful. Sword Demon liked to experience the fun of the game. It was rare to have four NPCs listen to him, so he was a bit reluctant to sacrifice them. He thought about it and said, Do you think we can disguise them? Disguise how? System soldiers, you see, they can be recognized as NPCs at a glance, mainly because their clothes are too NPC. It's very orthodox. Give them some equipment and I don't think they'll be recognized as NPCs at a glance. Sword Demon said. Will it work? Gu Fei was puzzled. Tell them to remove their equipment and see if they listen. Sword Demon said. Gu Fei immediately ordered, Remove the armor. The four soldiers obediently took off their armor from head to toe, and each of them wore a tight-fitting underwear. It really works. Gu Fei was surprised. Hurry up and put on their equipment. Wait here. Sword Demon flew over. The city gate was very close to the warehouse. Sword Demon's warehouse also had a lot of inventory, so it wasn't a problem to take care of the four people. This wasn't equipment, but disguise. Places like accessories were empty, so there was no need to care. The four soldiers listened to Gu Fei's arrangements and put on the equipment that Sword Demon brought. As expected, they didn't look like NPCs. At first glance, two thieves, one warrior, and one priest looked very much like players. I don't know what good equipment NPCs use. Sword Demon muttered at this time, picking up the equipment that the soldiers changed out of. At the same time, he carefully stared at them, worried that they wouldn't let him touch their equipment. In the end, the soldiers ignored Sword Demon. Sword Demon picked up the soldier's armor and looked at it. He was very excited. Damn, it's a set. A 5-piece set? The system soldier's equipment was a green equipment set, consisting of a helmet, armor, belt, combat boots, and gauntlets. The 4 rows of additional attributes were enough to make people excited. At the moment, there were no players with so many parts in an equipment set. Sword Demon was excited, but he suddenly saw a row of words on the equipment. Mission item, cannot be equipped. Damn. This was too disappointing. Gu Fei also came over to take a look. Sword Demon put the equipment back. Put away all the equipment. Gu Fei tried to give the order. The soldiers were really smart. They even knew how to use the pocket function on the player's equipment and put their armor into their pockets. It's about time. I think we can really get through this. Let's go. Gu Fei said. The 2 of them and the 4 soldiers rushed out of the city gate together and quickly blended into the fierce battle between the players and the system guards. At this time, the guards and the players were fighting in close combat. The catapults on the city wall had stopped. The mages didn't use area of effect spells. They observed the situation with the archers and shot. Everything was as Gu Fei expected. The system guards treated them as partners and didn't attack them at all. In the eyes of the players, they were also comrades. Naturally, they wouldn't make things difficult for them. Some players just happened to see these 6 guys running in the opposite direction. They thought they were being chased and jumped out to cut them off. In the end, they didn't find anything. They just watched the 6 of them pass through the formation without stopping. Since the camp was a spontaneous battle without any organization, no one paid any attention to the 6 people going against the flow. The main spirit of the battle here was, do what you want to do, even if you don't want to fight anymore, and run to the leveling area to level up. Gu Fei, Sword Demon, and the other 4 soldiers ran away from the battlefield in one breath. After running all the way, Sword Demon came to another conclusion. These 4 guys aren't slow. Gu Fei and Sword Demon both had outstanding movement speed among the players. However, these 4 soldiers were all warrior type, yet they had this movement speed. This was how unreasonable the system was. It might be specially coordinated with my movement speed. Otherwise, why would I coordinate with their movement speed? That wouldn't be an escort mission. Gu Fei said, makes sense. Sword Demon nodded. He looked at the coordinates again and pointed to the front. It's over there. We're almost there. I think this may be similar to a 2-way mission. There should be some players here who received the mission to use this engineer to attack the city. Now my mission is to destroy this mission of theirs. Well, then let's approach carefully now. Sword Demon suggested. What are you afraid of? They definitely won't guess that we're actually opponents. Gu Fei said. Then why don't we mask ourselves? Otherwise, we'll be exposed this time. Sword Demon's vision was very far-sighted. You're quite treacherous, Gu Fei exclaimed. Sword Demon was sincere. Boss, my mission hasn't been completed yet. It turned out that he was thinking about this. Gu Fei smiled, so he took the suggestion and covered his face with a cloth. He thought that the team should have a unified style, so he waved to the 4 guards. Cover your faces. Butterfly knot. 4 NPC soldiers appeared in this chapter. Cough. That lion's mouth was wide open. He wanted 4 small characters at a time, claiming that they were for the 4 brothers in the dormitory. For soldiers, take them. Don't be polite. Chapter 669. The soldiers were very smart and understood the meaning of the mask. But to mask, there had to be cloth first. The soldiers obviously didn't have it, but they knew how to make it themselves. They picked up the corner of the clothes with one hand and pulled it with the other. With a rip sound, the mask was torn off. Sword Demon's heart was broken. The equipment on the soldier's body belonged to him. Could it still be used after it was torn? The sword ghost hurriedly used identification on it, and sure enough, a modifier was added in front of the good equipment. Tattered. The word was still the same, but the quality of the equipment had dropped significantly. What followed was the drop in attributes. The sword ghost wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He inspected the 4 soldiers one by one, and only the warrior's armor was intact. The armor was made from a full set of refined armor, and there was no cloth that could be torn, so the soldier tore off his underwear. But the 3 of them came in whatever way was convenient. 2 thief equipment and 1 priest equipment were all tattered. Sword Ghost's heart ached to the point of dying. The priest equipment was one thing. He had only obtained it by accident. Seeing that it had some value, he didn't casually throw it away. He would sell it when he had the time. However, those 2 thief equipment were for his own use. It hadn't been easy for him to collect them, but now they were completely destroyed. Gu Fei didn't notice Sword Demon's pain and was still praising the 4 soldiers. Really, they came in whatever way was convenient. This one is smart enough. He knew that the armor couldn't be torn, so he went to tear the underwear. My equipment. Can you stop giving random orders? Sword Demon was really distressed. If he didn't remind them, he was afraid that Gu Fei would give another reckless order and destroy his collection again. Oh, you still want these equipment? Gu Fei asked. Everyone was different. The items that Sword Ghoul had placed in the warehouse were all top-notch items that were worth storing. Gu Fei, on the other hand, was a person who would casually throw things into the warehouse. Other than collecting weapons that suited him, he had no desire for other equipment. Moreover, weapons that suited him were things that he could use at any time, so he kept them all in his pockets instead of storing them in the warehouse. Yes, all of them. Sword Demon quickly responded. Gu Fei nodded. At the same time, he discovered that the soldiers were quite obedient. They were able to find a way to do things like not wearing a cloth and a mask, which they could not do at first. Ripping off the equipment with one hand? Not even players could do such a thing. Otherwise, when PvP, he could go up and tear apart the other party's equipment and lower the other party's attributes. He would be invincible. Thinking of this, Gu Fei suddenly had an idea, and said to the 4 soldiers, "Stealth." Stealth was a skill exclusive to thieves. Could these warriors learn it as well? The Sword Demon stared at the 4 soldiers nervously. Players didn't like to see NPCs acting like rascals, as it would make them feel mentally unbalanced. In fact, every player had a dream. That was to have a versatile character with all the characteristics of the class. This dream was very unrealistic, but if they saw that NPCs could realize this dream, players would be very unhappy. The 4 soldiers listened to the order, and there was no hesitation or confusion on their faces. They crouched down and looked for a boulder or dead tree that could be used as cover, shrinking their bodies behind it. Gu Fei and the Sword Demon looked at each other. The soldiers were too smart. They actually used this method to carry out stealth. Thinking of this, Gu Fei felt that it was too stupid to think of a way to get rid of the 4 soldiers. Couldn't he just give them an order to wait in the city? Wait! Gu Fei felt that it wasn't too late to give this order. The 4 soldiers immediately stopped moving. "Let's go." Gu Fei said. "Go where?" The Sword Demon asked. "Where do you think we should go?" "The quest." Gu Fei said. "What about them?" "Wait here so they don't get in the way." Gu Fei said. "Don't bring them along to play." The Sword Demon was reluctant to part with the 4 soldiers like he was reluctant to part with his equipment. How interesting. Gu Fei really didn't know how lucky he was. Such a fun setting, and he actually became a burden. "Then you bring them along." Gu Fei said. "You don't listen to me." The Sword Demon said. Gu Fei thought about it and said to the soldiers, "Listen to him." "Does it work?" The Sword Demon was puzzled and ordered the soldiers, "Stand up." No NPC cared. The Sword Demon was depressed. "You do it. Get up and follow." Gu Fei said. The 4 soldiers got up, lined up, and stood behind Gu Fei. The Sword Demon was jealous to death. "The soldiers will go back after the quest is over, right? If I were you, I wouldn't complete the quest and play a little longer." Gu Fei looked at him. "You mean to say that we should first bring some people to help you complete the quest?" "Absolutely not." The Sword Demon hurriedly said, "Why don't you understand? Isn't it fun to take for soldiers?" "What's fun? Isn't it fun?" "Is it fun? Okay, stop arguing." Quest. The sword demon interrupted the argument. This was a conflict of ideas. There would certainly be a conflict between a person who didn't take the game seriously and a person who was absolutely loyal to the game. So the two of them continued to move forward with the four soldiers. Their faces were covered. Seeing the coordinates gradually approaching, the terrain in front of them was getting lower. It was obvious that a pit was going to appear. The sword demon looked around in surprise. There wasn't a pit here before. It's specially arranged. It seems like it's here, Gu Fei said. Let's go. Not stealthily? By stealthily, the sword ghost was referring to sneaking in like the four soldiers. No need. That would be suspicious. They'll think we're on the same side. Gu Fei said. Makes sense. As for the mask, it wasn't anything suspicious. The mask was also a common headgear, especially among assassins. In addition, there were no class requirements for equipment in the parallel world, so it was very common for mages, priests, and warriors to wear a mask. Of course, as long as they used appraisal, it would immediately be revealed whether the cloth was equipment or mask. However, Gu Fei and the others didn't mind this. The mask was indeed a mask for them. Anyway, once they started fighting, the other party would definitely know that they were players with bad intentions. There was no need to hide too much. The two of them and the four NPCs pretended to be a passing team and walked casually. Before they reached the edge of the pit, Gu Fei had already sent a message to the sword demon. There's a thief. The sword demon knew that he had found a thief in stealth and immediately replied, It's an ambush. Well, pretend that we don't know and continue walking. Let's see their reaction. Gu Fei said, pretending that he didn't know there was a thief and continued to walk forward. However, at this time, a few players had already climbed out of the pit. A warrior in front of them took the initiative to ask, You guys, which guild are you from? Gu Fei and the sword demon were stunned when they saw the people coming up. Their heads subconsciously turned to look in other directions. However, someone on the other side already said, You think I can't recognize you two just because you're masked? Gu Fei and the sword demon were helpless. They couldn't help it, they were too familiar with each other. Among the few people who came up from the pit, the Han family young master was impressively among them. The two of them also saw that the row of people on the other side clearly had the guild badge of Singing to Wine hanging on their chests. It seemed that the people from Singing to Wine had discovered this mission. Since they were already recognized, what was the point of hiding? Gu Fei waved his hand to remove the mask, pulled out his sword and knocked on the ground. Mission. If there's nothing else, run. Although Gu Fei was famous, not many people knew him in person. However, his behavior was well known in Cloud City. The warrior who spoke before was stunned. He looked back at the Han family young master and wondered, Is it Qianli drunk? Obviously, he also knew that Qianli drunk and the Han family young master were companions of the mercenary group. Well, if you know, why aren't you running? Gu Fei purposely acted arrogantly to provoke the other party's anger. He was worried that the other party would turn around and run after hearing his name. As his reputation grew, the probability of this happening increased. However, this time, he had clearly underestimated the importance Wine when Singing would place on this mission. Hearing that he would not back down even half a step, the warrior frowned and said, Is the Amethyst Rebirth trying to steal our mission? This warrior knew Gu Fei quite well. He even knew that Gu Fei was a member of the girls' guild, Reborn Amethyst. This was something that Gu Fei always felt embarrassed about. Now that it was brought up in public, he actually blushed and said, It has nothing to do with the guild. Then what are you doing? Before the warrior could ask, the Han family young master already waved his hand. Stand back. What? The bystanders were shocked. They thought that the Han family young master was siding with his mercenary group. This was not a secret in Singing to Wine. Everyone knew that the top cleric of the Han family young master's focus was on his mercenary group. As for the guild, leveling up and activities, he would participate if he wanted to and not if he didn't want to. It was very unreliable. As a member of a big guild, he became famous by mingling in a random party every day. This made the outside world think that Singing to Wine was jealous of the talented and excluded the top players. However, the Han family young master simply replied, "Avoid the distance of his teleportation." Normal players might not know about the situation of Gu Fei and the Sword Demon, but how could the Han family young master not know about it? After sending messages about enemies, he saw the two wandering around the city through his binoculars. They even fired a cannon and killed Black Rose. With the intelligence of the Han family young master, he had already determined that these two were enemies this time. However, he did not expect to meet them so coincidentally. Of course, it's too late. Gu Fei laughed and teleported behind the row of people. As soon as he touched the ground, the trap on the ground bounced up and heat rose. The sky was bright with fire. The Han family young master turned around and looked at him. "What do you mean it's too late? You tricked me." Gu Fei was depressed. This time, he had teleported over, so he didn't step on the trap. Plus, he was a little careless this time. He couldn't react in time when the trap popped out, and he was caught firmly in the trap. At this time, he saw the whole picture of the pit. A few simple tents, a bonfire, and a lot of mages. In terms of mages, Singing to Wine was definitely the best in Cloud City. When Gu Fei glanced at the Han family young master, he already saw his hand behind his back. He didn't have time to stop gesturing to the mages. Now that the soles of his feet were hot and the sky was bright, it was obvious that the mages had started to move according to his instructions. This guy was purposely gesturing for the others to retreat. In fact, he was luring Gu Fei over. After fighting side by side for so long, he knew Gu Fei's style too well. He knew that Gu Fei didn't talk much and liked to fight as soon as possible. Charge! Gu Fei felt that if he died like this, it would be embarrassing enough. No matter what, he had to leave something behind. With a command, the 4 soldiers jumped out and lined up in a row. They drew their swords from their waists and charged forward. This was something that even the Han family young master didn't expect. Among the 4 of them, one was dressed like a warrior. Who would have thought that all 4 of them were warriors? They were more familiar with the charge skill than many experts. Moreover, the 4 of them moved in unison. In the blink of an eye, 4 sharp swords filled with a murderous aura shot towards the young master of the Han family. The warrior who had spoken earlier had actually lowered his head and activated charge. It seemed that he was quite confident in his own strength. Everyone else had already scattered in all directions to dodge, and Gu Fei was the one who was exposed to the muzzle of the charge. This was what Gu Fei wanted. He immediately ordered the soldier who was rushing towards him, "Be gentle." The soldier's sword stabbed into Gu Fei's waist. At this time, the ground was already on fire. Gu Fei's HP was already half burned. If he didn't have a lot more HP than normal mages, he would have already turned into white light. The soldier didn't know how to understand the "be gentle" order. In any case, the sword stabbed Gu Fei and sent him flying. The fire wheel that fell from the sky almost brushed past his body. The damage from the fire on the ground had already stopped. Gu Fei's people flew towards the group of mages. This was what he was hoping for. As a mage, he understood the characteristics of mages. If he flew into the group, the opponent would not be able to use AoE spells immediately. They would hurt their own people. Unexpectedly, the Han family young master had already ordered a few mages to point at where Gu Fei was about to land. AoE spells. Gu Fei was depressed. He forgot that the other party's commander was this inhumane guy. What do you mean by hurting our own people? Why would this guy care about this kind of thing? Moreover, the current setting was that people who died would not drop their levels. Unexpectedly, the few mages did not move after hearing the Han family young master's order. Instead, they looked at him in confusion. "There's one of us." The Han family young master was even more depressed than Gu Fei. He knew that this was probably the only chance to kill Gu Fei. Unexpectedly, these people did not understand his intention. Did they not have eyes? Did they not know that they were on the same side? What he meant was for them to blow them up as well. How could those pieces of trash compare to Qianli's drunkenness? It was too late for the Han family young master to say these things. Gu Fei fell into the group of mages. Without any AoE spells, some of the mages thought that they were smart enough to use small fireballs. However, they did not expect that Gu Fei would casually wave his sword and extinguish all the fireballs. Two of the mages who used ice whirlwinds were also roasted by Gu Fei's dual flame flash. However, Gu Fei was still unable to move. This trap was obviously set by an expert, and it was not over yet. Gu Fei looked back and saw that the 4 soldiers had intelligently engaged in battle with the players after using charge. Meanwhile, the soldier who used charge against the warrior ended up in a draw. But this was enough to surprise the warrior. The warrior in front of him was wearing a priest's robe. At this time, Gu Fei had only solved the urgent problem. The trap had not fallen off, and he was trapped in the enemy's formation. Looking at the 4 soldiers, Gu Fei suddenly had an idea. He shouted at the 4 people, "Earth Splitter, jump in. Don't hurt me." Gu Fei had seen the system guards use this skill in Shady Forest City. The 4 soldiers in front of him obviously did not have the strength of those divine guards, but they should be quite versatile in terms of skills. Gu Fei tried to shout, and the 4 soldiers suddenly let go of the opponents in front of them and rushed into the pit in unison. Suddenly, they rose from the ground, held the sharp weapons in their hands, and slashed down heavily on the ground. The mages were stunned. This skill had not been circulated among the players at all. At most, some people had seen the official demonstration video. They did not expect it to suddenly appear in front of them at this moment, and there were 4 of them at once. The 4 warriors landed together, and the ground cracked where their feet landed. All the players felt the earth tremble, especially those who were in the attack range of the Earth Splitter. The shaking was especially violent, and their health dropped. And Gu Fei was in the middle of it, but he did not suffer any damage at all. That "don't hurt me" was really useful. The system's accuracy was definitely far better than any player's. The 4 Earth Splitter made the mages dizzy, but Gu Fei was not affected at all. "Beautiful!" Gu Fei shouted, and at the same time shouted at the sword demon, "It's quite fun. Stop being so long-winded. Tell them to change their equipment, whirlwind slash." The sword demon was also fighting with someone, and he wanted to save Gu Fei, but he did not have the chance. In the end, he saw that Gu Fei's command of the soldiers was really beautiful, especially the Earth Splitter. It was hard for Gu Fei to remember that the system guards had such a skill. Change back to the original equipment, whirlwind slash. Gu Fei was afraid that the soldiers would not know what equipment to change after hearing it, so he deliberately added the word original as a rhetorical device. The 4 soldiers were like transformers. In an instant, they took off their unsuitable equipment, took out their original armor, and quickly equipped themselves. Only then did the 4 murderous warriors reveal themselves. They then executed Gu Fei's second command, whirlwind slash. The storm of sharp blades swept through the group of mages. The mages were a little dumbfounded when they heard Gu Fei's commands. Those who reacted quickly were already running when they heard him say whirlwind slash, but the mages' legs were really not that fast. The 4 warriors used whirlwind slash together, strangling them into a river of white light. During this time, the sword demon shouted, "Equipment, tell them to pack up their equipment." Sword demon's pile of equipment was directly thrown on the ground after they were changed. Obviously, the system guard's equipment did not have the design of pockets. They had nowhere to put it, so they could only throw it away. "Wait a moment." Gu Fei responded. He saw a strong gust of wind sweeping the back of his neck, and he quickly shrank his head to avoid being cut by the tip of the sword. Thinking that he seemed to have missed an order, he quickly reminded, "Don't hurt me." It seemed that in the big battle royale, when these guys used this kind of area of effect attack, this command was indispensable. Gu Fei concluded. Chapter 670. When the soldier was wearing the priest robe, he was already able to hold his own against the expert warriors. Now that he was equipped with a set of equipment that made Sword Ghoul gasp in admiration, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. There was no way that the mages could withstand this attack. In an instant, several streaks of white light appeared, and a few of the weaker mages with slow reactions were killed. Gu Fei realized that he couldn't do anything, So he tried his best to think of a solution. Suddenly, an idea popped up in his mind, and he yelled at one of the soldiers, "Help me remove this trap." The trap was stuck in his foot, and he couldn't remove it himself. After all, this was a game. If you wanted to remove the trap, then you had to have the corresponding skill to remove the trap. Gu Fei saw that these 4 soldiers were so capable, so he wanted to see if they knew how to remove the trap as well. The soldier obeyed and squatted down to remove the trap clip that was still stuck in Gu Fei's foot. But this time, Gu Fei was disappointed. The soldier pulled the trap, and Gu Fei was dragged half a meter away from the ground. There were no signs of the trap falling off. It was obvious that the soldier didn't know how to remove the trap, but since Gu Fei wanted him to do it, he obeyed. He just had to pull the trap down. But he didn't care if he could pull it off or not. Gu Fei quickly said, Okay, go do your thing." In the end, the soldier didn't understand. He continued to grab the trap clip and dragged Gu Fei half a meter away. Gu Fei quickly gave a clear command, "Stop, go fight." The soldier got up and went to kill the mages without looking back. The drunken song players were in a mess. Although the Han family young master was shouting at the side to keep the situation under control, he was someone who rarely interacted with the guild and had no prestige in the hearts of the players. Suddenly, he wanted people to listen to him in the middle of an event. How could there be such a good thing in this world? Going against the current, on the other hand, trusted his abilities and assigned him to a very important mission. When the situation was calm, everyone could still listen to young Master Han's commands as a reasonable suggestion. But now that the battlefield was suddenly in chaos, young Master Han, who had no prestige, had no expectations in the hearts of these people. No one paid any attention to his words. Even against the current believed in the Han family young master's unpredictable planning and cleric skills. But he didn't hand over the command of this mission to someone he wasn't familiar with. The warrior who asked the question and charge was the real commander of this mission. This warrior was called Manchuan. His equipment wasn't too eye-catching, but he was an old comrade who had grown up with against the current. He was one of the core members of the guild, and his skill and awareness were quite good. His equipment wasn't too good, but it had a lot to do with luck. As long as there was a commander, the situation wouldn't be as chaotic as it seemed. Unfortunately, Manchuan was no longer around. Sword Ghoul and the other veterans immediately knew that he was the leader, and they also understood the importance of capturing the leader first. They immediately used a misty ambush on Manchuan, and Manchuan didn't even have the time to give any commands before he went to the resurrection point. Manchuan wasn't the only one outside the crater. There were a few others who had come up with him, including the young master of the Han family, as well as a few stealth thieves. Everyone was in a state of chaos. Some wanted to go down and deal with the 4 warriors, while others wanted to come up and capture Sword Ghoul. Sword Ghoul was incredibly experienced. After killing Manchuan, he started moving around to deal with these people. After circling a few times, he once again found a target to attack. Impressively, he charged towards the Han family young master. Gu Fei couldn't move in the pit, but he could see everything clearly. He saw the sword demon kill Manchuan, and then charge towards the Han family young master. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Sword demon, you're really too serious." Currently, no one was listening to the Han family young master's words. However, if they continued to attack randomly, it was very likely that his continuous command would gradually be heard by the others, and they would start to follow his orders. The Han family young master had thought of this. Therefore, although no one was listening to his commands, his voice didn't stop, and he continued to give out orders while looking at the chaotic state of the players. The incomparably experienced sword demon had also determined this point. After killing Manchuan, he immediately attacked the Han family young master. He had no intention of going easy on him. The Han family young master smiled disapprovingly and said, "Not killing me right away is your biggest mistake. It's not too late." The sword demon was indeed very serious. He didn't even smile as he stabbed forward with his sword. Although the Han family young master wasn't a combat class, his reaction was quite quick. He actually dodged the attack. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a long sword to return the blow to the sword demon. Gu Fei was shocked and cried out, You secretly learned my martial arts? The Han family young master turned around and glanced at him. Is there even a need to learn? Just take a look and you'll know. Gu Fei couldn't stand people looking down on his martial arts. However, the trap on his leg didn't come off, and he was extremely anxious. On the other side, the sword demon and the Han family young master were fighting each other. After taking a few more glances, Gu Fei couldn't help but laugh. What are you doing? You're just putting on an act. Gu Fei was actually feeling quite pained just now. He had painstakingly trained his martial arts for so many years, but the Han family young master just casually watched him PK in the game and learned it? This was too unbalanced. At this time, after watching the Han family young master play a few more times, he realized that it was just an empty stance. He was just imitating the moves that Gu Fei used before. Hearing that Gu Fei had seen through it, he said helplessly, "That's true." However, even Gu Fei was deceived by this move, let alone the sword demon. Moreover, the sword demon knew that this guy's brain wasn't human. Maybe he really watched Gu Fei's fights and learned a lot of martial arts, so he was very careful. Gu Fei could see that the Han family young master was putting on an act after a few moves, but the sword demon didn't have this ability and was still being careful. After hearing Gu Fei's words, he came to a realization. It turned out that they were all empty moves. However, it was too late to react. There was still a group of people chasing after the sword demon. They had already caught up. The sword demon wasn't Gu Fei, and he wasn't weak against the drinking and singing players. The sword demon really wasn't a match for such a group of people, so he could only give up the opportunity to kill the Han family young master and move to another position. You there. Mages attack that side, you two go into stealth. The Han family young master didn't care. Seeing the group of pursuers in front of him, he casually commanded them. However, he didn't know their names. This was a little troublesome. This group of people had long lost their backbone. It was like playing football without tactics. They only knew how to chase after the ball. Now that someone suddenly gave them directions, it was as if a bright light had lit up in their hearts. The thing that the Han family young master was looking forward to and the thing that the sword demon was worried about finally happened. The chaotic players started to accept the commands of the Han family young master. At this time, it had to be said that the drinking and singing guild had given orders. When something happened here, someone had already sent a message to inform upstream. The channel was filled with shouts. Upstream wanted to find Man Chuan to understand the situation, but he received a message from Man Chuan saying, "I'm dead." The leader was already dead. Wasn't this a group of dragons without a leader? As the guild leader, Upstream knew the seriousness of the situation. He was also very clear about the abilities of the Han family young master. Just as he was about to order everyone to listen to the commands of the Han family young master, he received news that the ambushers were Chinli drunk and the sword demon. All of a sudden, Upstream began to hesitate. At this time, the Han family young master sent him a message. "If you don't say something, you're going to die." The Han family young master wasn't stupid enough to wait for those people to accept him. He would find the fastest way to make those people listen to him. Of course, this was the guild leader's order. Smart people didn't need too much explanation. The message from the Han family young master, Upstream knew what he was referring to. However, he still cautiously asked about the situation over there. After learning from his confidant that the Han family young master really didn't hold back against the two people, he gritted his teeth and ordered the people in the guild to listen to the commands of the Han family young master. At this time, the group of people who were chasing after the sword demon outside the pit had begun to automatically accept the commands of the Han family young master. The people in the pit were still at a loss, but when Upstream's order came, their hopes were ignited again. What was more disappointing was that someone actually asked, "Who is the Han family young master?" Light Priest, the one who looks very unique. Upstream was very concerned about the quest here, and quickly wanted to use the fastest way to describe it. However, he quickly remembered that the Han family young master could also see it in the guild channel. Saying that a man looks like a woman, or a woman looks like a man, was obviously not something to be happy about. In a hurry, Upstream changed his words. After obtaining the command, the first thing that the Han family young master thought of was to get rid of Gu Fei. Just when he was about to turn around and deploy to Gu Fei's side, he saw Gu Fei somersaulting happily and flicking the trap away with his sword. He said excitedly, "It's done." Mages retreat out of the pit. Archers attack Qianli drunk. Warriors escort him. Priests, don't worry about the mages, protect the warriors. Everyone move towards the 4 o'clock direction. Han family young master's command was a long list, and the target was Gu Fei. In comparison, Gu Fei's command was much simpler. He pointed at the Han family young master and only said 2 words, "Attack." The whirlwind slash of the minions was not unlimited and had already stopped at this time. The players who had been drinking and singing came back to their senses. Now that they had a leader, they gritted their teeth and prepared to counterattack. Their hatred was quite clear. Gu Fei and the others did not really care about them, but they hated the 4 little soldiers to the core. However, when Gu Fei threw the trap, he did not need the minions to take care of him anymore. He actually sent the 4 minions to attack the Han family young master. No matter how smart the Han family young master was, he could not figure out the identity of the 4 guards at this moment. He only felt that it was strange when he saw that they were obedient to Gu Fei's command without hesitation. At this moment, a player suddenly shouted in astonishment, "They are NPCs." At this moment, someone came back to his senses and began to use identification on the opponents to determine the situation. The 4 warriors were exposed after the appraisal. The Han family young master also came to his senses. He did not expect such a plot to happen. The 4 minions had the speed of non-minions. They charged toward the Han family young master briskly. The Han family young master had a clear understanding of the situation. He immediately gave the order, "Ice whirlwind." As he gave the order, he turned around and ran. He did not want to stand still and wait for his death. The players who were singing and drinking in the pit followed the orders of the Han family young master. They adjusted their formation while the archers harassed Gu Fei with homing arrows. Gu Fei had been exercising his limbs for a long time, and he was already invigorated. Moreover, when he was immobile, he had eaten some fruits to replenish his mana. At this moment, when he shouted, "I'm coming," he ignored the Han family young master and ran to the side where there were more people. Ice whirlwind 2 rose, "Stop him." Spread out a sea of fire. Warriors and magicians, cover in front. Move back as a whole, try to stay at least 6 meters away from him and exhaust his mana. The Han family young master gave the order quickly. Of course, he could not say it out loud to let Gu Fei know. When a string of words appeared in the channel, Gu Fei was knocking down a few homing arrows that were flying toward him. The ice whirlwind had already formed a row and was blowing toward him. Just as the Han family young master expected, Gu Fei did not dodge at all. He immediately used dual flame flash. Based on the priority of the skill, the one with the highest damage would win. The row of ice whirlwinds was swept away by Gu Fei. He was about to charge forward, but he did not expect there to be another row of ice whirlwinds behind him. Gu Fei took a few steps back. When he saw that the cooldown of teleportation had just ended, he waved his hand and passed through the obstacle in a flash. In the end, he was met with an overwhelming sea of fire. He tricked me again. Gu Fei's face was full of tears as he stared hatefully at the Han family young master's side. This arrangement, step by step, was just waiting for him to step on it. There was no helping it, this guy understood his fighting habits too well. Looking at the front of the enemy formation, the warriors were already waiting. If Gu Fei's dual flame flash didn't turn around and deal double damage, he would not be able to insta-kill the current high-level warriors. And because of the Han family young master's understanding of him, these warriors were very particular about positioning themselves. One of the main reasons why Gu Fei's dual flame flash was so good when he turned around was because his opponents were very cooperative. As soon as he charged forward, his opponents would immediately surround him, filling up all 360 degrees around him. Wasn't this just looking for a second? But right now, the Han family young master was clearly not going to give him this opportunity. As a result, Gu Fei decided not to waste his mana and didn't continue to charge forward. Instead, he hurriedly dodged to the left. Just now, he had eaten fruits to replenish his mana and bread to replenish his HP. After passing through the ice tornado and seeing the AoE attack, Gu Fei immediately dodged. His reaction speed was even faster than when he was stabbed by the minions, so he didn't lose much HP. Archers continue to harass him. The assassins go into stealth and approach from different directions to distract him. Report the distance between you and him. Pay attention to the levels. Spread out the formation and surround him. Once you're done, attack with him as the center. Don't worry about hurting your own people. The Han family young master continued to arrange. Gu Fei immediately saw that the other side had the intention to spread out the encirclement. He also paid attention to the Han family young master's side. The 4 minions had been hit by the Mage's ice tornado, and their speed had greatly decreased. The Han family young master commanded his people to eliminate Gu Fei, while also arranging for the rest of his people to attack the 4 minions. It couldn't be helped. Singing to wine had plenty of people here. At this time, the sword demon was like a kite. He ran in front while a bunch of people chased him from behind. Those who were still chasing after him were not weak in terms of speed, and the sword ghoul had no chance to shake them off. The 4 minions had a system-style fighting style. They dealt 1,000 damage to the enemy and 800 damage to themselves. They didn't really defend against the players' attacks. Especially now that Gu Fei had given them the order to attack the Han family's young master, this bunch of fellows actually stubbornly insisted on charging towards the Han family's young master. At this time, after being hit by the ice tornado, their movement was slowed down. They still struggled to move forward. There was also a lurker player who insidiously laid a trap. After a minion stepped on it, his movement was restricted. However, he still struggled toward the Han family young master. The Han family young master, this insidious guy, completely saw through the 4 minions' stubbornness. He used himself as bait and constantly led them into the players' attacks. With this, Gu Fei realized how stupid his previous simple order to target the Han family young master was. The 4 minions probably couldn't hold on for long. Seeing this, they still didn't give up and continued to desperately chase the Han family young master. This stiff action actually made Gu Fei feel an inexplicable sadness in his heart. This is persistence. I understand it the most. At this moment, the minion that was trapped in the trap was finally killed by the players. Before he fell, he still pointed his sword in the direction of the Han family young master. What was even more tragic was that after the minion fell, the white light did not disappear like the players. The body fell on the desolate wilderness. The players stepped over it, and some of them even squatted down to loot the body. Gu Fei was furious. He suddenly ignored the enemies around him and charged toward the Han family young master's group like a minion. Gu Fei ignored the harassing archers and the lurkers that tried to distract him. It was as if he had gathered his aggro. He saw the lurkers sneaking to the front to lay another trap. This was the route that the Han family young master took, and the path that the minions had to pass. Fight, fight, fight freely. Gu Fei roared at the minions. Then he swung the night streamer, lightning spell, descend. A bolt of lightning struck the lurker. However, the lurker's body was surprisingly sturdy, and he did not die after taking the hit. Gu Fei was furious. He took out a white dagger and threw it like a throwing knife. The knife pierced through the head of the lurker. He's not dead yet. The Han family young master had already healed him with the recovery spell. He was looking at Gu Fei with disdain. Gu Fei did not have the time to care about him. He rushed toward the 3 minions and roared. He flashed to the side of the 3 minions, killing a few players on the spot. Recover! Gu Fei shouted at the 3 minions while attacking the players around him. He was relieved when he saw the 3 minions taking out bandages. It was indeed a way to recover their health. The Han family young master smiled in disdain again. He did not even send the order in the channel. He waved his hand and said casually, "Blow them up together." The mages lined up in a line, waved their staffs and started chanting spells. Gu Fei and the 4 minions did not have perfect health. The mages of singing and wine would not be so careless when using spells. The AoE spell would cover a large area. Gu Fei had already seen it in the tournament. Even if he could dodge it, the 3 minions would be in trouble. Gu Fei was feeling regretful when he saw the sword demon driving the train to the side. He raised the 2 daggers in his hands and used Misty Ambush. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.